been in the air for 10 years at least. He nodded with a relieved grin, so happy with the discovery that for a moment he seemed to forget his fear. Then he looked around and shrugged uncomfortably. I could find other paths more easily than muffled Dadaranel. Carvalin, for instance, or Stedding Shanghai. It's only 3 bridges to Stedding Shanghai from the last island. I suppose the elders want to talk to me by this time. Faldara, Loyal, Moraine said firmly. The eye of the world lies beyond Faldara, and we must reach the eye. Faldara, the Ogier agreed reluctantly. Back at the island, Loyal pored over the script-covered slab intently, drooping eyebrows drawn down as he muttered half to himself. Soon he was talking completely to himself, or he dropped into the Ogier language. That inflected tongue sounded like deep-voiced birds singing. It seemed odd to Rand that a people so big had such a musical language. Finally, the Ogier nodded. As he led them to the chosen bridge, he turned to peer forlornly at the signpost beside another. 3 crossings to Stedding Shanghai, he sighed, but he took them on past without stopping and turned onto the 3rd bridge beyond. He looked back regretfully as they started across, though the bridge to his home was hidden in the dark. Rand took the bay up beside the Ogier. When this is over, Loyal, you show me your Stedding and I'll show you Emmons Field. No ways, though. We'll walk or ride, even if it takes all summer. You believe it will ever be over, Rand? He frowned at the Ogier. You said it would take 2 days to reach Faldara. Not the ways, Rand. All the rest. Loyal looked over his shoulder at the Aes Sedai, talking softly with Lan as they rode side by side. What makes you believe it will ever be over? The bridges and ramps led up and down and across. Sometimes a white line ran off into the dark from the guiding, just like the line they had followed from the
Hey, Fire, how you doing?
Rand saw that he was not the only one who eyed those lines curiously.
I still got to get a couple rolled up.
Parent, Matt, and even Egwene left the lines reluctantly.
I'm kind of throwing a little munch real quick.
Each of them, a gate back into the world, where there was sky and sun and wind.
Having some ramen noodles with some
they did. Under the Aes Sedai's sharp eye.
Hamburger meat. Well,
Rand was not the only one
it's what we had for dinner. We had some tacos, so it's some hamburger meat with too much taco season, hamburger meat mixed in with a bowl of ramen.
Loudly, but he got down as quickly as anyone else. Lan and the boys unsaddled and hobbled the horses while Nynaeve and Egwene set up a small oil stove to make tea. Looking like the base of a lantern, it was what Lan said warders used in the Blight, where the wood could be dangerous to burn. The warder produced tripod legs from the baskets they took off the pack horse, so the lantern poles could be set in a circle around their campsite. Loyal examined the guiding for a moment, then dropped down cross-legged and rubbed a hand across the dusty, pockmarked stone. Once things grew on the islands, he said sadly. All the books tell of it. There was green grass to sleep on, soft as any feather bed. Fruit trees to spice the food you brought with an apple or a pear or a bell fruit. Sweet and crisp and juicy, whatever the time of year outside. Nothing to hunt, Perrin growled, then looked surprised that he had spoken. Egwene handed Loyal a cup of tea. He held it without drinking, staring at it as if he could find the fruit trees in its depths. Aren't you going to set wards? Nynaeve asked Moraine. Surely there must be worse than rats in this. Even if I haven't seen any, I can still feel. The Aes Sedai rubbed her fingers against her palms distastefully. You feel the taint, the corruption of the power that made the ways. I will not use the one power in the ways unless I must. The taint is so strong that whatever I try to do would surely be corrupted. That made everyone as silent as Loyal. Lan settled down to his meal methodically, as if he were stoking a fire, the food less important than fueling his body. Moraine ate well too, and as tidily as if they were not squatting on bare stone, quite literally in the middle of nowhere. But Rand only picked at his food. The tiny flame of the oil stove gave just enough heat to boil water,
I'll be right back. I gotta take the bowl and wash it real quick. And
his shoulders brushed Matt and Perrin.
then we'll get a couple
They all
rolled
made a
up.
tight circle around the stove. Matt held his bread and meat and cheese forgotten in his hands, and Perrin set his tin plate down after only a few bites. The mood became more and more glum, and everyone looked down, avoiding the dark around them. Moraine studied them as she ate. Finally, she put her plate aside and patted her lips with a napkin. I can tell you one cheerful thing. I do not think Tom Maryland is dead. Rand looked at her sharply. But the Fade. Matt told me what happened in Whitebridge, the Aes Sedai said. People there mentioned a Gleeman, but they said nothing of him dying. They would have, I think, if a Gleeman had been killed. Whitebridge is not so big as for a Gleeman to be a small thing. And Tom is a part of the pattern that weaves itself around you three. Too important a part, I believe, to be cut off yet. Too important, Rand thought. How could Moraine know? Min? She saw something about Tom? She saw a great deal, Moraine said wryly. About all of you. I wish I could understand half of what she saw, but even she does not. Old barriers fail, but whether what Min does is old or new, she sees true. Your fates are bound together. Tom Maryland's too. Nynaeve gave a dismissive sniff and poured herself another cup of tea. I don't see how she saw anything about any of us, Matt said with a grin. As I remember it, she spent most of her time looking at Rand. Egwene raised an eyebrow. Oh, you didn't tell me that, Moraine said I. Rand glanced at her. She was not looking at him, but her tone had been too carefully neutral. I talked to her once, he said. She dresses like a boy and her hair is as short as mine. You talked to her? Once? Egwene nodded slowly, still not looking at him. She raised her cup to her lips. Min was just somebody who worked at the inn in Bearlawn, Perrin said. Not like Abraham. Egwene choked on her tea. Too hot, she ordered. Who's Aram? Rand asked. Perrin smiled, much like Matt's smile in the old days when he was up to mischief, and hid behind his cup. One of the traveling people, Egwene said casually, but red spots bloomed in her cheeks. One of the traveling people, Perrin said blandly. He dances, like a bird. Wasn't that what you said, Egwene? It was like flying with a bird? Egwene set her cup down deliberately. I don't know if anyone else is tired, but I'm going to sleep. As she rolled herself up in her blankets, Perrin reached over to nudge Rand in the ribs and winked. Rand found himself grinning back. Burn me if I didn't come out fast for a change. I wish I knew as much about women as Perrin. Maybe, Rand, Matt said slyly.
And then for later on for dessert, I got.
Well, daughter Els. Egwene lifted her head to stare first at Matt, then at him. He hastily got up to fetch his own blankets. Sounds good to me right now. All the Emmonsfield people began seeking their blankets then, and Loyal too. Moraine sat sipping her tea and laughed. The warden did not look as if he ever intended to sleep, or needed to. Even rolled up for sleep, no one wanted to get very far from the others. They made a small circle of covered mounds right around the stove, almost touching one another. Man, whispered. Was there anything between you and me? I barely got a look at her. She was pretty, but she must be nearly as old as Nynaeve. What about this Els? Perrin added from the other side of him. She pretty? Blood and ashes, he mumbled. Can I even talk to a girl? You two are as bad as Egwene. As the wisdom would say, Matt chided mockingly. Watch your tongue. Well, if you won't talk about it, I'm going to get some sleep.
Throw some roaches up.
Good, Rand grumbled. That's the first decent thing you've said. Sleep was not easily come by, though.
That's nice.
The stone was hard, however Rand lay, and he could feel the pits through his blanket. There was no way to imagine he was anywhere but in the waves, made by the men who had broken the world, tainted by the Dark One. He kept picturing the broken bridge and the nothing under it. When he turned one way, he found Matt looking at him. Looking through him, really. Mocking was forgotten when the dark around him was remembered. He rolled the other way, and Perrin had his eyes open too. Perrin's face was less afraid than Matt's, but he had his hands on his chest, tapping his thumbs together worriedly. Moraine made a circuit of them, kneeling by each person's head and bending down to speak softly. Rand could not hear what she said to Perrin, but it made his thumbs stop. When she bent over Rand, her face almost touching his, she said in a low, comforting voice, "Even here, your destiny protects you. Not even a dark one can change the pattern completely. You are safe from him, so long as I am close. Your dreams are safe. For a time, they are safe." As she passed from him to Matt, he wondered if she thought it was that simple, that she could tell him he was safe and he would believe it. But somehow he did feel safe. Safer, at least. Thinking that, he drifted into sleep and did not dream. Lan woke them. Rand wondered if the warder had slept. He did not look tired, not even as tired as those who had laid some hours in the hard stone. Moraine allowed enough time to make tea, but only 1 cup apiece. They ate breakfast in the saddle, Loyal and the warder leading. It was the same meal as the others.
Stab myself with my grinder.
Rand thought it would be easy to get tired of bread and meat and cheese. Not long after the last crumb was licked off a finger, Lan said quietly, "Someone is following us, or something." They were in the middle of a bridge, both ends of it hidden. Matt jerked an arrow from his quiver, and before anyone could stop him, loosed it in the dark behind him. "I knew I shouldn't have done this," Loyal muttered. "Never deal with an Aes Sedai except in the steading." Lan pushed the bow down before Matt could knock another. "Stop that, you village idiot. There's no way to tell who it is." "That's not the only place they're safe," Yogir went on. "What else would be in a place like this besides something evil?" Matt demanded. "That's what the elders say, and I should have listened to them." "We are, for one," the warder said dryly. "Maybe it's another traveler," Egwene said hopefully. "An Ogier, perhaps." "Ogier have more sense than to use the ways," Loyal growled. "All but Loyal, who has no sense at all. Elder Hammond always said it, and it's true." "What do you feel, lad?" Moraine asked. "Is it something that serves the Dark One?" The warder shook his head slowly. "I don't know," he said, as if that surprised him. "Cannot tell. Perhaps it's the ways and the taint. It all feels wrong. But whoever it is, or whatever, he's not trying to catch us." He almost caught up at the last island and scampered back across the bridge so as not to. "If I fall behind, I might surprise him, though, and see who or what he is." "If you fall behind, warder," Loyal said firmly, "you'll spend the rest of your life in the woods. Even if you can read Ogier, I have never heard or read of a human who could find his path off the first island lacking an Ogier guide. Can you read Ogier?" Lan shook his head again, as Moraine said, "So long as he does not trouble us, we will not trouble him. We have no time. No time." As they rode off the bridge onto the next island, Loyal said, "If I remember the last guiding correctly, there is a path from here that leads toward Narvalan. Half a day's journey at most. Not quite as long as it will take us to reach Muffled Daranel. I'm sure that..." He cut off as the light of their lanterns reached the guiding. Near the top of the slab, deeply chiseled lines, sharp and angular, made wounds in the stone. Suddenly, Lan's alertness was no longer hidden. He remained easily erect in his saddle, but Rand had the sudden impression that the warder could feel everything around him, even feel the rest of them breathing. Lan began circling his stallion around the guiding, spiraling outward. He rode as if he were ready to be attacked, but to attack himself. "This explains much," Moraine said softly, "and it makes me afraid. So much. I should have guessed. The taint, the decay. I should have guessed." "Guessed what?" Nynaeve demanded, just as Loyal asked. "What is it? Who did this? I've never seen or heard of anything like it." The Aes Sedai faced them calmly. "Trollocs." She ignored their frightened gasps. "Poor Fades. Those are Trolloc runes. The Trollocs have discovered how to enter the ways. That must be how they got to the two rivers undiscovered. Through the waygate at Monethrin. There is at least one waygate in the Blight. She glanced toward land before continuing. The water was far enough away that only the faint light of his lantern could be seen. Monethrin was destroyed, but almost nothing can destroy a waygate. That is how the Fades could gather a small army around Camelot without raising an alarm in every nation between the Blight and Andor. Pausing, she touched her lips thoughtfully. But they cannot know all the paths yet. Else they would have been pouring into Camelot through the gate we used. Yes. Rand shivered. Walking through the waygate to find Trollocs waiting in the dark, hundreds of them, perhaps thousands, twisted giants with half-animal faces, snarling as they leaped forward in the blackness to kill. Or worse. They don't use the ways easily, Land called. His lantern was no more than 20 spans off, but the light of it was only a dim, fuzzy ball that seemed very distant to those around the guiding. Moraine led the way to him. Rand wished his stomach were empty when he saw what the water had found. At the foot of one of the bridges, the frozen shapes of Trollocs reared, caught flailing about them with hooked axes and scythe-like swords. Gray and pitted like the stone, the huge bodies were half sunken into the swollen, bubbled surface. Some of the bubbles had burst, revealing more snouted faces, forever snarling with fear. Rand heard someone retching behind him, and swallowed hard to keep from joining whoever it was. Even for Trollocs, it had been a horrible way to die. A few feet beyond the Trollocs, the bridge ended. The signpost lay shattered into 1,000 shards. Loyal got down from his horse gingerly, eyeing the Trollocs as if he thought they might come back to life. He examined the remains of the signpost hurriedly, picking out the metal script that had been inlaid in the stone, then scrambled back into his saddle.
This was the first bridge of the path from here to Tarvalin,
he said. Matt was scrubbing the back of his hand across his mouth with his head turned away from the Trollocs. Egwene hid her face in her hands. Rand moved his horse close to Bella and touched her shoulder. She twisted around and clutched him, shuddering. He wanted to shudder too. Her holding him was the only thing that kept him from it. As well, we are not going to Tarvalin yet, Moraine said. Nynaeve rounded on the Aes Sedai. How can you take it so calmly? The same could happen to us. Perhaps, Moraine said sincerely, and Nynaeve ground her teeth so hard Rand could hear them grate. It is more likely, though, Moraine went on, unruffled, that the men, the Aes Sedai, who made the ways, protected them, building in traps for creatures of the Dark One. It is something they must have feared then, before the Halfmen and Trollocs had been driven into the Blight. In any case, we cannot tarry here, and whatever way we choose, back or ahead, is as likely to have a trap as any other. Loyal, do you know the next bridge?
Yes. They did not ruin that part of the guiding, thank the light.
For the first time, Loyal seemed as eager to go on as Moraine did. He had his big horse moving before he finished speaking. Egwene clung to Rand's arm for 2 more bridges. He regretted it when she finally let go with a murmured apology and a forced laugh. And not just because it had felt good having her hold on to her that way. It was easier to be brave, he discovered, when someone needed your protection. Moraine might not have believed a trap could be set for them, but for all the haste she spoke of, she made them travel more slowly than before, pausing before letting them onto any bridge or off one onto an island. She would step all deep forward, feeling the air in front of her with an outstretched hand, and not even Loyal or Rand was allowed to go ahead until she gave permission. Rand had to trust her judgment about traps, but he peered into the darkness around them as if he could actually see anything more than 10 feet away, and strained his ears listening. If Trollocs could use the ways, then whatever was following them could be another creature of the Dark One. Or more than one. Lan had said he could not tell in the ways, but as they crossed bridge after bridge, ate a midday meal riding, and crossed still more bridges, all he could hear were their own saddles creaking, and the horses' hooves, and sometimes one of the others coughing or muttering to himself. Later there was a distant wind, too, off in the black somewhere. He could not say in which direction. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but with time he became sure. It'll be good to feel the wind again, even if it's cold. Suddenly he blinked. Loyal, didn't you say there isn't any wind in the ways? Loyal pulled his horse up just short of the next island and cocked his head to listen. Slowly his face paled and he licked his lips. Machin-chin, he whispered hoarsely. The black wind. The light illumine and protect us. It's the black wind. How many more bridges? Moraine asked sharply. Loyal, how many more bridges? 2, I think 2. Quickly then, she said, trotting Aldeeb onto the island. Find it quickly. Loyal talked to himself or to anyone who was listening while he read the guiding. They came out mad, screaming about Machin-chin. Might help us. Even those Aes Sedai could heal, they... He scanned the stone hastily and galloped toward the chosen bridge with a shouted, This way! This time Moraine did not wait to check. She urged them on to a gallop, the bridge trembling beneath the horses, lanterns swinging wildly overhead. Loyal ran his eyes over the next guiding and wheeled his big mount around like a racer almost before it had stopped. The sound of the wind became louder. Rand could hear it even over the pounding of hooves on stone. Behind them, and gusting closer. They did not bother with the last guiding. As soon as the light of the lanterns caught the white line running from it, they swung in that direction, still galloping. The island vanished behind, and there was only the pitted gray stone underfoot and the white line. Rand was breathing so hard he was no longer sure if he could hear the wind. Out of the darkness, the gates appeared, vine-covered and standing alone in the black, like a tiny piece of wall in the night. Moraine leaned out of her saddle, reaching toward the carvings, and suddenly pulled back. The Avon de Soralik is not here, she said. The key is gone. Light, Matt shouted. Bloody light! Loyal threw back his head and gave a mournful cry, like a howl of dying. Egwene touched Rand's arm. Her lips trembled, but she only looked at him. He put his hand on top of hers, hoping he did not look more frightened than she did. He felt it. Back toward the guiding, the wind howled. He almost thought he could hear voices in it. Voices screaming vileness that even half understood, brought bile up in his throat. Moraine raised her staff, and flame lanced from the end of it. It was not the pure white flame that Rand remembered from Emond's Field and the battle before Shadowvoga. Sickly yellow streaked through the fire, and slow-drifting flecks of black like soot. A thin, acrid smoke drifted from the flame, setting Loyal coughing and the horses dancing nervously. But Moraine thrust it at the gates. The smoke rasped Rand's throat and burned his nose. Stone melted like butter, leaf and vine withering in the flame and vanishing. The Aes Sedai moved the fire as fast as she could, but cutting an opening big enough for everyone to get through was no quick task. To Rand, it seemed as if the line of melted stone crept along its arc at a snail's pace. His cloak stirred as if caught by the edge of a breeze, and his heart froze. I can feel it, Matt said, his voice quavering. Light, I can bloody feel it!
Got one rolled up, just gotta roll up one more.
Done, she said. Half done. A thin line ran across the stone carving. Rand thought he could see light, dim, but still light, through the crack. But despite the cutting, the two big curved wedges of stone still stood there, half an arc out of each door. The opening would be big enough for everyone to ride through, though Loyal might have to lie flat on his horse's back. Once the two wedges of stone were gone, it would be big enough. He wondered how much each weighed. 1,000 pounds? More? Maybe if we all get down and push. Maybe we can push one of them over before the wind gets here. A gust tugged at his cloak. He tried not to listen to what the voices cried. As Moraine stepped back, Mondarb leaped forward, straight toward the gates. Lan crouched in the saddle. At the last instant, the warhorse twisted to catch the stone with his shoulder, just as he had been taught to catch other horses in battle. With a crash, the stone toppled outward, and the warder and his horse were carried by their momentum through the smoky shimmer of a waygate. The light that came through was mid-morning light, pale and thin, but it seemed to Rand as if the noonday summer sun blazed in his face. On the far side of the gate, Lan and Mondarb slowed to a crawl, stumbling in slow motion as the warder reined back around toward the gate. Rand did not wait. Pushing Bella's head toward the opening, he slapped the shaggy mare hard on the croup. Egwene had just enough time to throw a startled look over her shoulder at him before Bella carried her out of the ways. All of you, out! Moraine directed. Quickly! Go! As she spoke, the Aes Sedai thrust her staff out at arm's length, pointed back toward the guiding. Something leaped from the end of the staff, like liquid light rendered to a syrup of fire. A blazing spear of white and red and yellow, streaking into the black, exploding. coruscating like shattered diamonds. The wind shrieked in agony. It screamed in rage. The thousand murmurs that hid in the wind roared like thunder. Roars of madness, half-heard voices cackling and howling promises that twisted Rand's stomach, as much by the pleasure in them as by what he almost understood them to say. He booted Red forward, crowding into the opening, squeezing after the others, all forcing through the smoky glistening at once. The icy chill ran through him again, the peculiar sensation of being slowly lowered face down into a winter pond, the cold water crawling across his skin by infinitesimal increments. Just as before, it seemed to go on forever, while his mind raced, wondering if the wind could catch them, while they were held like that. As suddenly as a pricked bubble, the chill vanished, and he was outside. His horse, for one abrupt instant moving twice as fast as he had been, stumbled and almost pitched him over his head. He threw both arms around the bay's neck and hung on for dear life. While he got back into the saddle, Red shook himself, then trotted over to join the others as calmly as if nothing at all odd had happened. It was cold, not the chill of the waygate, but welcome natural winter cold that slowly, steadily burrowed into flesh. He pulled his cloak around him, his eyes in the dull glimmer of the waygate. Beside him, Lan leaned forward in his saddle, one hand on his sword. Man and horse were tensed, as if on the point of charging back through if Moraine did not appear. The waygate stood in a jumble of stones at the base of a hill, hidden by bushes except where the falling pieces had broken down the bare, brown branches. Alongside the carvings on the remains of the gates, the brush looked more lifeless than the stone. Slowly, the murky surface bulged like some strange, long bubble rising to the surface of a pond. Moraine's back broke through the bubble. Inchmeal, the Aes Sedai, and her dim reflection backed out of each other. She still held her staff out in front of her, and she kept it there as she drew Aldib out of the waygate after her, the white mare dancing with fear, eyes rolling. Still watching the waygate, Moraine backed away. The waygate darkened. The hazy shimmer became murkier, sinking through gray to charcoal, then to black as deep as the heart of the ways. As if from a great distance, the wind howled at them, hidden voices filled with an unquenchable thirst for living things, filled with a hunger for pain, filled with frustration. The voices seemed to whisper in Rand's ears, right at the brink of understanding, and within it. Flesh so fine to tear, to gash the skin to strip, to plate, so nice to plate the strips, so nice, so red the drops that fall, blood so red, so sweet. Sweet screams, pretty screams, singing screams. Scream your song, sing your screams. The whispers drifted, the blackness lessened, faded. The waygate was again a murky shimmer seen through an arch of carved stone. Rand let out a long, shuddering breath. He was not the only one. He heard other relieved exhalations. Egwene had Bella alongside Nynaeve's horse, and the two women had their arms around each other, their heads on each other's shoulders. Even Lan seemed relieved, though the hard planes of his face showed nothing. It was more in the way he sat Mondarb, a loosening of the shoulders as he looked at Moraine, a tilt of the head. It could not pass, Moraine said. I thought it could not. I hoped it could not. Ah! She tossed her staff on the ground and scrubbed her hand on her cloak. Char, thick and black, marked the staff for over half its length. The taint corrupts everything in that place. What was that? Nynaeve demanded. What was it? Loyal appeared confused. Why, Machin Shin, of course. The black wind that steals souls. But what is it? Nynaeve persisted. Even with a Trolloc you can look at it, touch it if you have a strong stomach. But that... He gave a convulsive shiver. Something left from the time of madness, perhaps, Moraine replied. Or even from the War of the Shadow, the War of Power. Something hiding in the ways so long it can no longer get out. No one, not even among the Ogier, knows how far the ways run or how deep. It could even be something of the ways themselves. As Loyal said, the ways are living things, and all living things have parasites. Perhaps even a creature of the corruption itself. Something born of the decay. Something that hates life and light. Stop, Egwene cried. I don't want to hear any more. I could hear it saying... She cut off, shivering. There is worse to be faced yet, Maureen said softly. Rand did not think it to be heard. The Aes Sedai climbed into her saddle wearily and settled
Hey,
there with a
Babylon,
grateful
how you
sigh.
doing?
This is dangerous, she said.
Got 2
looking at
rolled
the
up,
broken
some
gates.
roachweed.
Her charred staff received only a glance.
Now let's do a
The thing
dab.
pointed out that anyone could wander in. Agamar must send men to wall it up once we reach Valdara. She pointed to the north, to towers in the misty distance above the barren treetops. Chapter 46. Valdara. The country around the Waygate was rolling, forested hills, but aside from the gates themselves, there was no sign of any ogier growth. Most of the trees were gray skeletons clawing at the sky. Fewer evergreens than Rand was used to dotted the forest, and of them, dead, brown needles and leaves covered many. Loyal made no comment beyond a sad shaking of his head. As dead as the blasted lands, Nynaeve said, frowning. Egwene pulled her cloak around her and shivered. At least we're out, Aaron said, and Matt added, out where? Shinar, Matt told him. We're in the borderlands. In his hard voice was a note that said home, almost. Rand gathered his cloak against the cold. The borderlands. Then the blight was close by. Blight. The eye of the world. And what they had come to do. We are close to Valdara, Maureen said. Only a few miles. Across the treetops, towers rose to the north and east of them, dark against the morning sky. Between the hills and the woods, the towers often vanished as they rode, only to reappear again when they topped a particularly tall rise. Rand noticed trees split open as if struck by lightning. The cold, Len answered when he asked. Sometimes the winter is so cold here, the sap freezes and trees burst. There are nights when you can hear them cracking like fireworks, and the air is so sharp you think that might shatter too. There are more than usual this winter past. Rand shook his head. Trees bursting. That was during an ordinary winter? What must this winter have been like? Surely like nothing he could imagine. Who says winter's past? Matt said, his teeth chattering. Why this, a fine spring, sheepherder, Rand said. A fine spring to be alive. But if you want warm, well, it will be warm in the blight. Softly, Matt muttered. Bloody ashes. Bloody ashes. Rand barely heard him, but it sounded heartfelt. They began to pass farms, but though it was the hour for midday meals to be cooking, no smoke rose from the high stone chimneys. The fields were empty of men and livestock both, though sometimes a plow or a wagon stood abandoned, as if the owner meant to be back any minute. At one farm close by the road, a lone chicken scratched in the yard. One barn door swung freely with the wind. The other had broken off the bottom hinge and hung at an angle. The tall house, odd to Rand's Two Rivers eyes, with its sharp-peaked roof of big wooden shingles running almost to the ground, was still and silent. No dog came out to bark at them. A scythe lay in the middle of the barnyard. Buckets were overturned in a heap beside the well. Maureen frowned at the farmhouse as they rode by. She lifted Aldib's reins, and the white mare quickened her pace. The Emmons fielders were clustered with Loyal, a little behind the Aes Sedai in the water. Rand shook his head. He could not imagine anything growing there ever. But then he could not really imagine ways either, even now that he was past it. This, Nynaeve said quietly, with a gesture that took in all the empty farms they had seen. Where did they all go? Egwene said. What makes you think that? Door. They could have been gone all winter. Nynaeve and Egwene both looked at him, as if he were slow-witted. The curtains in the window, Egwene said patiently. They look too light for winter curtains, even here. As cold as it is here, no woman would have had those up more than a week or two, maybe less. The wisdom nodded. Curtains, Aaron chuckled. He immediately wiped the smile off his face when the two women raised their eyebrows at him. Oh, I agree with you. There wasn't enough rust on that side for any more than a week in the open. You should have seen that, man. Even if you missed the curtain. Always at Perrin trying not to stare. His eyes were sharper than Perrin's, or had been, when they used to hunt. But he had not been able to see that scythe blade well enough to make out any rust. I really don't care where they went, Matt grumbled. I just want to find someplace with a fire. Soon. Why did they go? Rand said under his breath. The blight was not far off here. The blight, where all the Fades and Trollocs were. Those not down in Andor chasing them. The blight, where they were going. He raised his voice enough to be heard by those close to him. Nynaeve, maybe you and Egwene don't have to go to the Eye with us. The two women looked at him as if he were speaking gibberish. But with the blight so close, he had to make one last try. Maybe it's enough for you to be close. Maureen didn't say you have to go. Or you, Loyal. You could stay at Faldara until we come back. Or you could start for Tarvalin. Maybe there'll be a merchant train, or I'll bet Maureen will even hire a coach. We will meet in Tarvalin when it's all over. Loyal's sigh was a rumble like thunder on the horizon. You swirl lives around you, Randolph. You and your friends. Your fate chooses ours. The Ogier shrugged, and suddenly a broad grin split his face. Besides, it will be something to meet the Green Man. Elder Hammond always talks about his meeting with the Green Man, and so does my father, and most of the elders. So many, Perrin said. The stories say the Green Man is hard to find, and no one can find him twice. Not twice, no, Boyle agreed. But then, I have never met him, and neither have you. He doesn't seem to avoid Ogier quite the way he does humans. He knows so much about trees, even the tree songs. Rand said. The point I was trying to make is, the wisdom cut him off. She says Egwene and I are part of the pattern too. All woven in with you three. If she is to be believed, there's something about the way that piece of the pattern is woven that might stop the Dark One. And I am afraid I do believe her. Too much has happened not to. But if Egwene and I go away, what might we change about the pattern? I was only trying to... Again, Nynaeve interrupted sharply. I know what you are trying to do. She looked at him until he shifted uneasily in his saddle. Then her face softened. I know what you are trying to do, Rand. I have little liking for any Aes Sedai, and this one least of all, I think. I have less for going into the Blight, but least of all is the liking I have for the Father of Lies. If you boys, you men, can do what has to be done when you'd rather do almost anything else, why do you think I will do less? Or Egwene? She did not appear to expect an answer. Gathering her reins, she frowned toward the Aes Sedai up ahead. I wonder if we're going to reach this Aldara place soon. Or does she mean us to spend the night out in this? As she trotted toward Maureen, Matt said, she called us men. It seems like only yesterday she was saying we shouldn't be off leading strings, and now she calls us men. You still shouldn't be off your mother's apron strings, Egwene said, but Rand did not think her heart was in it. She moved Bella close to his bay and lowered her voice so none of the others could hear, though Matt at least tried. I am going with you then, Rand, she said softly, not looking at him. You wouldn't hold it against me. Dancing with somebody I will never see again, would you? No, he told her. But what had made her bring it up now? Of course not. But suddenly he remembered something Min had said in Verlon, what seemed 100 years ago. She's not for you, nor you for her. At least, not in the way you both want. The town of Faldara was built on hills higher than the surrounding country. It was nowhere near as big as Caemlyn, but the wall around it was as high as Caemlyn's. For a full mile outside that wall, in every direction, the ground was clear of anything taller than grass, and that cut low. Nothing could come close without being seen from one of the many tall towers topped by wooden hoardings. Where the walls of Caemlyn had a beauty about them, The builders of Faldara
I'll
seemed not
be
to have
right back.
cared if anyone found their wall beautiful. The gray stone was grimly implacable, proclaiming that it existed for one purpose alone: to hold. Pennants atop the hoardings whipped in the wind, making the stooping Black Hawk of Shinar seem to fly all along the walls. Lan tossed back the hood of his cloak and, despite the cold, motioned for the others to do the same. Moraine had already lowered hers. "It's the law in Shinar," the warder said. "In all the borderlands. No one may hide his face inside a town's walls." "Are they all that good-looking?" Matt laughed. "A half-man can't hide with his face exposed," the warder said in a flat voice. Rand's grin slid off his face. Hastily, Matt pushed back his hood. The gates stood open, tall and covered with dark iron. But a dozen armored men stood guard in golden yellow surcoats, bearing the Black Hawk. The hilts of long swords on their backs peaked over their shoulders, and broadsword or mace or axe hung at every waist. Their horses were tethered nearby, made grotesque by the steel bardings covering their chests and necks and heads, with lances to stirrup, all ready to ride in an instant. The guards made no move to stop Lan and Moraine and the others.
Hell yeah, definitely. That's definitely the only way to do it.
"Daishan!" one cried, shaking steel gauntleted fists over his head as they rode past. "Daishan!" A number of others shouted. "Glory to the builders!" and "Kisarai Tiwonshu!" Loyal looked surprised, then a broad smile split his face, and he waved to the guards. One man ran alongside Lan's horse a little way, unhampered by the armor he wore. "Will the golden crane fly again, Daishan?" "Peace, Ragan," was all the warder said, and the man fell away. He returned the guard's waves, but his face was suddenly even more grim. As they rode through stone-paved streets, crowded with people and wagons, Rand frowned worriedly. Faldara was bulging at the seams. The people were neither the eager crowds of Cainlan, enjoying the grandeur of the city, even as they squabbled, nor the milling throngs of Berlon. Packed cheek by jowl, these folk watched their party ride by with leaden eyes and faces blank of emotion. Carts and wagons jammed every alleyway and half the streets, piled high with jumbled household furnishings, and carved chests packed so tight that clothes spilled. On top sat the children. Adults kept the younglings up where they could be seen and did not let them stray even to play. The children were even more silent than their elders, their eyes bigger, more haunting in their stares. The nooks and crannies between the wagons were filled with shaggy cattle and black-spotted pigs in makeshift pens. Crates of chickens and ducks and geese fitfully made up for the silence of the people. He knew now where all the farmers had gone. Lan led the way to the fortress in the middle of the town, a massive stone pile atop the highest hill. A dry moat, deep and wide, its bottom a forest of sharp steel spikes, razor-edged and as tall as a man, surrounded the towered walls of the keep. A place for a last defense if the rest of the town fell. From one of the gate towers, an armored man called down, "Welcome, Daishan!" Another shouted to the inside of the fortress, "The Golden Crane! The Golden Crane!" Their hooves drummed on the heavy timbers of the lower drawbridge as they crossed the moat and rode under the sharp points of the stout portcullis. Once through the gates, Lan sat down out of his saddle to lead Mandar, signaling the others to dismount. The first courtyard was a huge square paved with big stone blocks and surrounded by towers and battlements as fierce as those on the outside of the walls. As big as it was, the courtyard appeared just as crowded as the streets, and as much in turmoil, so there was an order to the crowding here. Everywhere were armored men and armored horses. At half a dozen smithies around the court, hammers clanged and big bellows, tugged by two leather-aproned men apiece, made the forge fires roar. A steady stream of boys ran with new-made horseshoes for the farriers. Fletchers sat making arrows, and every time a basket was filled, it was whisked away and replaced with an empty one. Jewelry grooms appeared on the eager and smiling in black and gold. He tied his belongings from behind the counter and gave the bay up to one of the grooms as a man in plated mail and leather bowed formally. He wore a bright yellow cloak edged in red over his armor, with the Black Hawk on the breast, and a yellow surcoat bearing a gray owl. He wore his helmet and was bareheaded, truly, for his hair had all been shaved except for the knot tied with a leather cord. It has been long, Marine, I said I. It is good to see you, Daishan. Very good. He bowed again to Loyal and murmured, "Glory to the builders. Kisarai Tiwansho."
I am unworthy, Loyal replied formally. And the work small. Tingu ma choba.
You honor us, builder, the man said. Kisarai Tiwansho. He turned back to land. Word was sent to Lord Agomar, Daishan. As soon as you were seen coming, he is waiting for you. This way, please. As they followed him into the fortress, along graphics and corridors hung with colorful tapestries and long silk screens of battles, he continued. I'm glad the call reached you, Daishan. Will you raise the golden crane banner once more? The halls were stark except for the wall hangings, and even they used the fewest figures made with the fewest lines necessary to convey meaning, though in bright colors. Are things really as bad as they appear, Intar? Lan asked quietly. Rand wondered if his own ears were twitching like Loyal's. The man's top knot swayed as he shook his head, but he hesitated before putting on a grin. Things are never as bad as they appear, Daishan. A little worse than usual this year, that is all. The raids continued through the winter, even in the hardest of it. But the raiding was no worse than anywhere else along the border. They still come in the night, but what else can be expected in the spring? If this can be called spring. The blight. Come back with news of Trolloc camps. Always fresh news of more camps. But we will meet them at Tarlin's Gap, Daishan, and turn them back as we always have. Of course, Lan said. He did not sound certain. Ingtar's grin slipped, but came back immediately. Silently, he showed them into Lord Agomar's study, then claimed the press of his duties and left. It was a room as purpose-made as all the rest of the fortress, with arrow slits in the outer wall and a heavy bar for the thick door, which had its own arrow piercings and was bound by iron straps. Only one tapestry hung here. It covered an entire wall and showed men, armored like the men of Faldara, fighting Murdrol and Trollocs in a mountain pass. A table, one chest, and a few chairs were the only furnishings, except for 2 racks on the wall. They caught Rand's eye as much as the tapestry. One held a 2-handed sword, taller than a man, a more ordinary broadsword, and below them, a studded mace and a long kite-shaped shield bearing 3 boxes. From the other hung a suit of armor, complete and arranged as one would wear it. Crested helmet with its barred face guard over a double mail camel. Mail hauberk, split for riding, and leather undercoat, polished from wear. Breastplate, steel gauntlets, knee and elbow cups, and half plate for shoulders and arms and legs. Even here, in the heart of the keep, weapons and armor seemed ready to be donned at any moment. Like the furniture, they were simply and severely decorated with gold. Agomar himself rose at their entrance and came around the table, littered with maps and sheafs of paper and pens standing in inkpots. He seemed at first glance too peaceful for the room in his blue velvet coat with its tall, wide collar and soft leather boots. But a second look showed Rand differently. Like all the fighting men he had seen, Agomar's head was shaved except for a top knot. That pure white. His face was as hard as Lan's, the only lines creases at the corners of his eyes. Those eyes like brown stone, though they bore a smile now. Peace, but it is good to see you, Daishan, the Lord of Faldara said. And you, Moraine Aes Sedai, perhaps even more. Your presence warms me, Aes Sedai. Ninte Kalichnia, Yodomashita, Daishan, Moraine replied formally, but with a note in her voice that said they were old friends. Your welcome warms me, Lord Agomar. Kodome Kalichnia, Yani Aes Sedai, Ei. Here is always a welcome for Aes Sedai. He turned to Loyal. You are far from the steading, Ogier, but you honor Faldara. Always glory to the builders. Kisarai Tiwansho Hei.
I am unworthy,
Loyal said, bowing.
It is you who do me honor.
He glanced at the stark stone walls and seemed to struggle with himself. Rand was glad the Ogier managed to refrain from adding further comment. Servants in black and gold appeared on silent, soft-slippered feet. Some brought folded cloths, damp and hot, on silver trays for wiping the dust from their faces and hands. Others bore mulled wine and silver bowls of dried plums and apricots. Lord Agomar gave orders for rooms to be prepared and baths. "A long journey from Tarmalin," he said. "You must be tired." "A short journey the path we came," Lan told him. "But more tiring than the long way."
Lighting number 1.
Agomar looked puzzled when the warder said no more, but he merely said, "A few days' rest will put you all in fine fettle." "I ask one night's shelter, Lord Agomar," Moraine said, "for ourselves and our horses. And fresh supplies in the morning if you can spare them. We must leave you early, I am afraid." Agomar frowned. "But I thought," Moraine said, I have no right to ask it of you. But you would be worth 1,000 lances in Tarwin's Gap. And you, Daishan. 1,000 men will come when they hear the golden crane flies once more." "The 7 towers are broken," Lan said harshly. "And Mokir is dead. The few of her people left scattered across the face of the earth. I am a warder, Agomar, sworn to the flame of Tarvalin. And I am bound into the blight." "Of course, Daishan. Man, of course. But surely a few days' delay, a few weeks at most, will make no difference. You are needed. You and Moraine said I." Moraine took a silver goblet from one of the servants. "Ingtar seems to believe you will defeat this threat as you have defeated many others across the years." "Aye, said I," Agomar said wryly. "If Ingtar had to ride alone to Tarwin's Gap, he would ride the whole way, proclaiming that the Trollocs would be turned back once more. He has almost pride enough to believe he could do it alone." "He is not as confident as you think this time, Agomar." The warder held a cup, but he did not drink. "How bad is it?" Agomar hesitated. From the tangle on the table. He stared unseeing at the map for a moment, then tossed it back. "When we ride to the Gap," he said quietly, "the people will be sent south to Falmoran. Perhaps the capital can hold. Peace, it must. Something must hold." "That bad," Lance said, and Agomar nodded wearily. Rand exchanged worried looks with Matt and Perrin. It was easy to believe the Trollocs gathering in the Blight were after him. After them. Agomar went on grimly. "Kandor, Arafel, Saldeia. The Trollocs raided them all straight through the winter. Nothing like that has happened since the Trolloc Wars. The raids have never been so fierce or so large, or pressed home so hard. Every king and council is sure a great thrust is coming out of the Blight. And every one of the Borderlands believes it is coming at them. None of their scouts and none of the warders report Trolloc passing above their borders, as we have here. But they believe, and each is afraid to send fighting men elsewhere. People whisper that the world is ending, that the Dark One is loose again. Shainar will ride to Tarwin's Gap alone. And we will be outnumbered at least 10 to 1.
All right, stimulate your mind.
At least.
And it's Friday. Well, it was Friday.
No, Daishan, for you are a diademed battle-lord of Mokir, whatever you say. Daishan, the golden crane banner in the van would put heart into the men who know they are riding north to die. The word will spread like wildfire. And though their kings have told them to hold where they are, lances will come from Arafel and Kandor, and even from Saldeia. Though they cannot come in time to stand with us in the Gap, they may save Shainar." Van peered into his wine. His face did not change, but wine slopped over his hand. The silver goblet crumpled in his grip. The servant took the ruined cup and wiped the warder's hand with a cloth. A second put a fresh goblet in his hand, while the other was whisked away.
All right.
Van did not seem to notice. "I cannot," he whispered hoarsely. When he raised his head, his blue eyes burned with a fierce light, but his voice was calm again and flat. "I am a warder, Agomar." His sharp gaze slid across Rand and Matt and Perrin to Moraine. At first light I ride to the blight. Agomar sighed heavily. Moraine said will you not come at least? And I said I could make the difference. I cannot, Lord Agomar. Moraine seemed troubled. There is indeed a battle to be fought, and it is not chance that the Trollocs gather above Shinar. But our battle, the true battle with the Dark One, will take place in the Blight, at the eye of the world. You must fight your battle, and we ours. You cannot be saying he is loose. Rock-like Agomar sounded shaken, and Moraine quickly shook her head. Not yet. You win at the eye of the world, perhaps not ever again. Can you even find the eye, Aes Sedai? If holding the Dark One depends on that, you might as well be dead. Many have tried and failed. I can find it, Lord Agomar. Hope is not lost yet. Agomar studied her, and then the others. He appeared puzzled by Nynaeve and Egwene. Their farm clothes contrasted sharply with Moraine's silk dress, though all were travel-stained. They are Aes Sedai too? He asked doubtfully. When Moraine shook her head, he seemed even more confused. His gaze ran over the young men from Emond's Field, settling on Rand, brushing the red-wrapped sword at his waist.
I'll be right back.
Strange god you take with you, Aes Sedai. Only one fighting man. He glanced at Perrin and at the axe hanging from his belt. Perhaps two, but both barely more than lads. Let me send men with you. 100 lances more or less will make no difference in the gap, but you will need more than one warder and 3 youths. And 2 women will not help unless they are Aiel in disguise. The blight is worse than usual this year. It stirs. 100 lances would be too many, Lan said, and 1,000 not enough. The larger the party we take into the blight, the more chance we will attract attention. We must reach the eye without fighting if we can. You know the outcome is all but foretold when Trollocs force battle inside the blight. Agomar nodded grimly, but he refused to give up. Fewer then. Even 10 good men would give you a better chance of escorting Moraine Sedai and the other 2 women to the Green Man than will just these young fellows. Rand abruptly realized that the Lord of Faldara assumed it was Nynaeve and Egwene through which Moraine would fight against the Dark One. It was natural. That sort of struggle meant using the one power, and that meant women. That sort of struggle means using power. He tucked his thumbs behind his sword belt and gripped the buckle hard to keep his hands from shaking. No men, Moraine said. Agomar opened his mouth again, and she went on before he could speak. It is the nature of the eye and the nature of the Green Man. How many from Faldara have ever found the Green Man and the eye? Ever? Agomar shrugged. Since the War of the 100 Years, you would count them on the fingers of one hand. No more than 1 in 5 years from all the borderlands together. No one finds the eye of the world, Moraine said, unless the Green Man wants them to find it. Need is the key, and intention. I know where to go. I have been there before. Rand's head whipped around in surprise. His was not the only one among the Emond's Guilders, but the Aes Sedai did not seem to notice. But one among us seeking glory. Seeking to add his name to those 4, and we may never find it, though I take us straight to the spot I remember. You have seen the Green Man, Moraine Sedai? The Lord of Faldara sounded impressed, but in the next breath he frowned. But if you have already met him once, need is the key, Moraine said softly. And there can be no greater need than mine, than ours. And I have something those other seekers have not. Her eyes barely stirred from Agomar's face, but Rand was sure they had drifted toward Loyal, just for an instant before the Aes Sedai pulled them back. Rand met the Ogier's eyes, and Loyal shrugged. Good, the Ogier said softly. Agomar threw up his hands. It will be as you say, Aes Sedai. Peace, if the real battle is to be at the eye of the world, I am tempted to take the Black Hawk banner after you instead of to the Gap. I could cut a path through you. That would be disaster, Lord Agomar. Both at Tarwin's Gap and at the Eye. You have your battle, and we ours. Peace. As you say, said I. Having reached a decision, however much he disliked it, the shaven-headed Lord of Faldara seemed to put it out of his mind. He invited them to table with him, all the while making conversation about hawks and horses and dogs, but with never a mention of Trollocs or Towern's Gap or the Eye of the World. The chamber where they ate was as stark and plain as Lord Agelmar's study had been, with little more furnishing it than the table and chairs themselves, and they were severe in line and form. Beautiful, but severe. A big fireplace warmed the room, but not so much that a man assuredly would be stunned by the cold outside. Liveried servants brought soup and bread and cheese, the topless of books and music, until Lord Agelmar realized the Emmonsfield folk were not talking. Like a good host, he asked gently probing questions, designed to bring them out of their quiet. Rand soon found himself competing to tell about Emmonsfield and the Two Rivers. It was an effort not to say too much. He hoped the others were guarding their tongues, Matt especially. Nynaeve alone held herself back, eating and drinking silently. There's a song Matt said, coming home from Tywin's Gap. He finished hesitantly, as if suddenly realizing that he was bringing up what they had been avoiding. But Agelmar handled it smoothly. Little wonder. Few lands have not sent men to hold back the blight over the years. Rand looked at Matt and Karen. Matt silently formed the word Manetheren. Agelmar whispered to one of the servants, and while others cleared the table, that man vanished and returned with a canister and clay pipes for Lan, Loyal, and Lord Agelmar. Two Rivers Tabak, the Lord of Faldara said as they filled their pipes. Hard to come by here, but worth the cost. When Loyal and the two older men were puffing contentedly, Agelmar glanced at the Ogier. You seem troubled, Builder. Not beset by the longing, I hope. How long have you been away from the steading? It is not the longing. I have not been gone such a time as that. Loyal shrugged, and the blue-gray streamer rising from his pipe made a spiral above the table as he gestured. I expected, hoped, that the grove would still be here. Some remnant of Mafal de Daranel at least. Sarai to Onshaw, Agelmar murmured. The Trolloc Wars left nothing but memories, Loyal son of Arent, and people to build on them. They could not duplicate the builder's work any more than I could. Those intricate curves and patterns your people create are beyond human eyes and hands to make. Perhaps we wish to avoid a poor imitation that would only have been an ever-present reminder to us of what we had lost. There is a different beauty in simplicity, in a single line placed just so, a single flower among the rocks. The harshness of the stone makes the flower more precious. We try not to dwell too much on what is gone. The strongest heart will break under that strain. The rose petal floats on water, Lan recited softly. The kingfisher flashes above the pond. Life and beauty swirl in the midst of death. Yes, Agelmar said. Yes. That one has always symbolized the whole of it to me, too. The two men bowed their heads to one another. Poetry. The man was like an onion. Every time Rand thought he knew something about the water, he discovered another layer underneath. Loyal nodded slowly. Perhaps I also dwell too much on what is gone. And yet the groves were beautiful. But he was looking at the stark room as if seeing it anew, suddenly finding things worth seeing. Ingtar appeared and bowed to Lord Agelmar. Your pardon, Lord, but you wanted to know of anything out of the ordinary, however small. Yes. What is it? A small thing, Lord. A stranger tried to enter the town. Not of Shinar. By his accent, a Lugarder. Sometimes, at least. When the South Gate guards attempted to question him, he ran away. He was seen to enter the forest, but only a short time later he was found scaling the wall. A small thing. Agelmar's chair scraped across the floor as he stood. Peace. The tower watch is so negligent a man can reach the walls unseen, and you call it a small thing? He is a madman. Awe touched Ingtar's voice. The light shields madmen. Perhaps the light cloaked the Tower Watch's eyes and allowed him to reach the walls. Surely one poor madman can do no harm. Has he been brought to the keep yet? Good. Bring him to me here. Now. Ingtar bowed and left, and Agomar turned to Moraine. Your pardon, Aes Sedai, but I must see to this. Perhaps he is only a pitiful wretch with his mind blinded by the light, but 2 days gone. 5 of our own people were found in the night trying to saw through the hinges of a horse gate. Small, but enough to let polish. He grimaced. Dark friends, I suppose, though I hate to think it of any Shienaran. They were torn to pieces by the people before the guards could take them, so I'll never know. If Shienarans can be dark friends, I must be especially careful of Outlanders in these days. If you wish to withdraw, I will have you shown to your rooms. Dark friends know neither border nor blood, Moraine said. They are found in every land, and are of none. I too am interested in seeing this man. The pattern is forming a web, Lord Agomar, but the final shape of the web is not yet set. It may yet entangle the world, or unravel and set the wheel to a new weaving. At this point, even small things can change the shape of the web. At this point, I am wary of small things out of the ordinary. Agomar glanced at Nynaeve and Egwene. As you wish, Aes Sedai. Ingtar guards carrying long bills and escorting a man who looked like a ragbag inside out. Grime layered his face and matted his scraggly uncut hair and beard. He hunched into the room, sunken eyes darting this way and that. A rancid smell wafted ahead of him. Bran sat forward intently, trying to see through all the dirt. You've no cause to be holding me like this, the filthy man whined. I'm only a poor destitute, abandoned by the light and seeking a place like everyone else to shelter from the shadow. The borderlands are a strange place to seek, Agomar began, when Matt cut him off. The peddler! Ardon Fane, Aaron agreed, nodding. The beggar, Bran said, suddenly hoarse. He sat back at the sudden hatred that flared in Fane's eyes. He's the man who was asking about us in Camelin. He has to be. Oh, this concerns you at all, Moraine Sedai, Agomar said slowly. Moraine nodded. I greatly fear that it does. I didn't want to. Fane began to cry. Fat tears cut runnels in the dirt on his cheeks, but they were unable to reach the bottom layer. He made me. Him and his burning eyes. Bran flinched. Matt had his hand under his coat, no doubt clutching the dagger from Shadar Logoth again. He made me his hound to hunt and follow with never a bit of rest. Only his hound, even after he threw me away. It does concern us all, Moraine said grimly.
Round one
I
down.
can talk with him alone, Lord Agomar. Her mouth tightened with distaste. And wash him first. I may need to touch him. Agomar nodded and spoke softly to Ingtar, who bowed and disappeared through the door. I will not be compelled. The voice was Fane's, but he was no longer crying, and an arrogant snap had replaced the whine. He stood upright, not crouching at all. Throwing back his head, he shouted at the ceiling. Never again! I will not! He faced Agomar as if the men flanking him were his own bodyguard, the Lord of Faldara his equal rather than his captor. His tone became sleek and oily. There is a misunderstanding here, great lord. I am sometimes taken by spells, but that will pass soon. Yes, soon I will be rid of them. Contemptuously, he flicked his fingers against the rags he wore. Do not be misled by these, great lord. I have had to disguise myself against those who would have tried to stop me, and my journey has been long and hard. But at last I have reached lands where men still know the dangers of Baalsman, where men still fight the Dark One. Bran stared goggling. It was Fane's voice, but the words did not sound like a peddler at all. So you've come here because we fight Trollocs, Agomar said. And you are so important that someone wants to stop you. These people say you are a peddler called Pt.12, and that you are following them. Thane hesitated. He glanced at Moraine and hurriedly pulled his eyes away from the Aes Sedai. His gaze ran across the Emmons fielders, then jerked back to Agomar. Rand felt the hate in that look, and the fear. When Thane spoke again, though, his voice was unruffled. Pt.12 is simply one of the many disguises I have been forced to wear over the years. Brains of the dark pursue me, for I have learned how to defeat the shadow. I can show you how to defeat him, Great Lord. We do as well as men can, Agomar said dryly. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, but we have fought the Dark One almost since the breaking of the world without peddlers to teach us how. Great Lord, your might is unquestioned, but can it stand against the Dark One forever? Do you not often find yourself pressed to hold? Forgive my temerity, Great Lord. He will crush you in the end as you are. I know. Believe me, I do. But I can show you how to scour the shadow from the land, Great Lord. His tone became even more unctuous, though still haughty. If you but try what I advise, you will see, Great Lord. You will cleanse the land. You, Great Lord, can do it, if you direct your might in the right direction. Avoid letting Tar Valon entangle you in its snares, and you can save the world. Great Lord, you will be the man remembered through history for bringing final victory to the light. The guards held their places, but their hands shifted on the long shafts of the bills, as if they thought they might have to use them. He thinks a great deal of himself for a peddler, Agomar said to Lan over his shoulder. I think Ingtar is right. He is mad. Thane's eyes tightened angrily, but his voice remained smooth. Great Lord, I know my words must appear grandiose, but if you will only... He cut off abruptly, stepping back as Moraine rose and started slowly around the table. Only the guards' lowered bills kept Thane from backing right out of the room. Stopping behind Matt's chair, Moraine put a hand on his shoulder and bent to whisper in his ear. Whatever she said, the tension went out of his face, and he took his hand from under his coat. The Aes Sedai went on until she stood behind Agomar, confronting Thane. As she came to a halt, the peddler sank into a crouch once more. I hate him, he whimpered. I want to be free of it. I want to walk in the light again. His shoulders began to shake, and tears streamed down his face even more heavily than before. He made me do it. I am afraid he is more than a peddler, Lord Agomar, Moraine said. Less than human, worse than vile, more dangerous than you can imagine. He can be bathed after I have spoken with him. I dare not waste a minute. Come, Lan. Chapter 47. More Tales of the Wheel. An itchy restlessness had Rand pacing beside the dining table. 12 strides. The table was exactly 12 strides long, no matter how many times he stepped it off. Irritably, he made himself stop keeping tally. Stupid thing to be doing. I don't care how long the bloody table is. A few minutes later, he discovered that he was counting the number of trips he made at the table and back.
My whistle. My brother, most hated grower, makes them out of the sheds of deer and elk or whatnot. I'm just gonna do it real light because it's kind of loud.
His yellow eyes stared unblinking at the crumbs, but they seemed to see something.
My bad. It's okay.
Matt slouched in his chair.
Yeah, he was made out of
in the beginnings of a grin on his face. It was a nervous grin.
Like I got one in here.
Outwardly, he looked like the old man, but from time to time, he unconsciously touched the shadow Loca's dagger through his coat. What is Thane telling her? What does he know? Loyal, at least, did not look worried.
I like this one just because it's...
the walls. First, he had stood in the middle of the room and stared, turning slowly in a circle. Now he was almost pressing his broad nose against the stone while he gently traced a particular joint with fingers thicker than most men's thumbs. Sometimes he closed his eyes as if the feeling was more important than seeing. His ears gave an occasional twitch, and he muttered to himself in Ogier, appearing to have forgotten anyone else was in the room with him. Lord Agomar stood talking quietly with Nynaeve and Egwene in front of the long fireplace at the end of the room. He was a good host, adept at making people forget their troubles. Several of his stories had Egwene in giggles. Once even Nynaeve threw back her head and roared with laughter. Bran gave a start at the unexpected sound and jumped
And
again
what's
when
cool is
Matt
I have,
crashed to the floor.
I end up ordering these
Blood
things.
and ashes, Matt growled, ignoring the way Nynaeve's mouth tightened at his language. What is taking you so long? He righted his chair and sat back down without
all
looking at
hand
anyone.
forged.
His hand straight to his coat. The Lord of Baldara looked at Matt disapprovingly. His gaze took in Rand and Perrin without any improvement, then turned back to the women. Rand's pacing had taken him close to them. My lord, Egwene was saying, as glibly as if she had been using titles all of her life. I thought he was a warder, but you call him Daishan, and talk about a golden crane banner, and so did those other men. Sometimes you sound almost as if he's a king. I remember once Moraine called him the last lord of the Seven Towers. Who is he? Nynaeve began studying her cup intently, but it was obvious to Rand that abruptly she was listening even more closely than was Egwene. Rand stopped and tried to overhear without seeming to eavesdrop. Lord of the Seven Towers, Agomar said with a frown. An ancient title, Lady Egwene. Not even the High Lords of Tyr have older, though the Queen of Andor comes close. He heaved a sigh and shook his head. He will not speak of it, yet the story is well known along the border. He is a king, or should have been, a landman Dragoran, Lord of the Seven Towers,
Camping
Lord of
tool.
the Lakes, crownless king of the Malkiri. His shaven head lifted high, and there was a light in his eyes that he felt a father's pride. His voice grew stronger, filled with the force of his feeling.
I got
The
a
whole room could hear without strength.
flint and steel in my
We of
bag.
Shinar call ourselves bordermen.
Well, I got a couple different
But
flint
fewer
and
than 50 years
steels.
ago, Shinar was not truly of the borderlands. North of us,
Always
and
pays to
Amaratown
have a flint and
was
steel.
Malkir. The lances of Shinar rode north, but it was Malkir that held back the blight. Malkir. Peace favor her memory and light illumine her name. Lan is from Malkir, the wisdom said softly, looking up. She seemed troubled. It was not a question, but Agomar nodded. Yes, Lady Nynaeve. He is the son of Al-Akir Mandragoran, last crowned king of the Malkiri. How did he become as he is? The beginning, perhaps, was Lane. On a dare, Lane Mandragoran, the king's brother, led his lances through the blight to the blasted lands, perhaps to Shale Ghul itself. Lane's wife, Brian, made that dare for the envy that burned her heart, that Al-Akir had been raised to the throne instead of Lane. The king and Lane were as close as brothers could be, as close as twins even after the royal Al was added to Akir's name.
I ended up
But
ordering
jealousy
it on
racked Brian.
eBay, I believe.
Lane was acclaimed for his deeds, and rightfully so, but not even he could outshine Al-Akir. He was man and king, such as comes once in 100 years, if that. Peace favor him, and Eliana. Lane died in the blasted lands with most of those who followed him. Then Malkir could ill afford to lose, and Brian blamed the king, saying that Shale Ghul itself would have fallen if Al-Akir had led the rest of the Malkiri north with her husband. For revenge, she plotted with Cowan Gamalin, called Cowan Fairheart, to seize the throne for her son, Esau. Now Fairheart was a hero almost as well loved as Al-Akir himself, and one of the great lords. But when the great lords had cast the rods for king, only two separated him from Akir. And he never forgot that two men laying a different color on the crowning stone would have set him on the throne instead. Between them, Cowan and Brian moved soldiers back from the blight to seize the Seven Towers, stripping the border forts to bare garrisons. But Cowan's jealousy ran deeper. Disgust tinged Agomar's voice. Bearheart, the hero, whose exploits in the Blight were sung throughout the borderlands, was a dark friend. With the border forts weakened, Trollocs poured into Malkier like a flood. King Al-Akir and Lane together might have rallied the land. They had done so before, but Lane's doom in the blasted lands had shaken the people, and the Trolloc invasion broke men's spirit and their will to resist. Too many men. Overwhelming numbers pushed the Malkiri back into the heartland. Rayan fled with her infant son Isam and was run down by Trollocs as she rode south with him. No one knows their fate of a certainty, but it can be guessed. I can find pity only for the boy. When Cowan Fairheart's treachery was revealed and he was taken by young Jayan Charin, already called Jayan Farstrider, when Fairheart was brought to the Seven Towers in chains, the great lords called for his head on a pike. But because he had been second only to Al-Akir and Lane in the hearts of the people, the king faced him in single combat and slew him. Al-Akir wept when he killed Cowan. Some say he wept for a friend who had given himself to the shadow, and some say for Malkier. The Lord of Valdara shook his head sadly. The first peal of the doom of the Seven Towers had been struck. There was no time to gather aid from Shinar or Arafel, and no hope that Malkier could stand alone with 5,000 of her lances dead in the blasted lands, her border forts overrun. Al-Akir and his queen, Eliana, had land brought to them in his cradle. Into his infant hands they placed the sword of Malkiri kings, the sword he wears today. A weapon made by Aes Sedai during the War of Power, the War of the Shadow that brought down the Age of Legends. They anointed his head with oil, naming him Daishan, a diademed battle lord. And they consecrated him as the next king of the Malkiri. And in his name they swore the ancient oath of Malkiri kings and queens. Agomar's face hardened, and he spoke the words as if he too had sworn that oath, or one much similar. To stand against the shadow so long as iron is hard and stone abides. To defend the Malkiri while one drop of blood remains. To avenge what cannot be defended. The words rang in the chamber. Eliana placed a locket around her son's neck for remembrance, and the infant, wrapped in swaddling clothes by the queen's own hand, was given over to 20 chosen from the king's bodyguard. The best swordsmen, the most deadly fighters. Their command, to carry the child to Falmorin. Then did Al-Akir and Eliana lead the Malkiri out to face the shadow one last time. There they died at Herod's Crossing, and the Malkiri died, and the Seven Towers were broken. Shinar and Arafel and Kandor met the Halfmen and the Trollocs at the Stair of Jahan, and threw them back, but not as far as they had been. Most of the Malkir remained in Trolloc hands, and year by year, mile by mile, the Blight has swallowed it. Agomar drew a heavy-hearted breath. When he went on, there was a sad pride in his eyes and voice. Only 5 of the bodyguards reached Falmorn alive. Every man wounded, but they had the child unharmed. From the cradle they taught him all they knew. He learned weapons as other children learned toys, and the Blight as other children their mother's garden. The oath sworn over his cradle is graven in his mind. There is nothing left to defend, but he can avenge. He denies his titles, yet in the borderlands he is called the Uncrowned. And if ever he raised the golden crane of Malkier, an army would come to follow. But he will not lead men to their deaths. In the Blight he courts death as a suitor courts a maiden, but he will not lead others to it. If you must enter the Blight, and with only a few, there is no man better to take you there, nor to bring you safely out again. He is the best of the warders, and that means the best of the best. You might as well leave these boys here to gain a little seasoning, and put your entire trust in Lan. The blight is no place for untried boys. Matt opened his mouth and shut it again at a look from Rand. I wish he'd learned to keep it shut. Nynaeve had listened just as wide-eyed as Egwene, but now she was staring into her cup again, her face pale. Egwene put a hand on her arm and gave her a sympathetic look. Moraine appeared in the doorway, Lan at her heels. Nynaeve turned her back on them. What did he say? Rand demanded. Matt rose, and Perrin too. Country. Agomar muttered, then raised his voice to a normal tone. Did you learn anything, Aes Sedai, or is he simply a madman? He is mad, Moraine said, or close to it. But there is nothing simple about Padan Thane. One of the black and gold liveried servants bowed his way in with a blue wash basin and pitcher, a bar of yellow soap, and a small towel on a silver tray. He looked anxiously at Agomar. Moraine directed him to put them on the table. Your pardon for commanding your servants, Lord Agomar, she said. I took the liberty of asking for this. Agomar nodded to the servant who put the tray on the table and left hurriedly. My servants are yours to command, Aes Sedai. The water Moraine poured into the basin steamed as if only just off the boil. She pushed up her sleeves and began vigorously washing her hands without regard for the heat of the water. I said he was worse than vile, but I do not come close. I do not believe I have ever met someone so abject and debased, yet at the same time so foul. I feel sorry.
Hell yeah, Babylon, that's badass.
And I do not mean for the filth on his skin.
Setting traps, that'd be something cool to learn.
The degradation of his soul almost makes me doubt he has one.
I could start fire, but I'm not sure about starting one in the rain.
He looked so pitiful.
If I knew how, I'd probably give it a shot.
I remember him arriving in Emmons Field each spring.
I'm able to start fire. Now making traps for food and
man can stand in the shadow so long that he cannot
other types of traps. No, I have no idea how to do that.
I have always believed it so, she said. Perhaps Padan Thane can be.
I could set like booby traps.
But he has been a dark friend more than 40 years. And what he has done for that, in blood and pain and death, will please your heart to hear. Among the least of these, though not small to you, I suspect, he brought the Trollocs to Emmons Field. Yes, Rand said softly. You heard Egwene gasp. I should have guessed. Burn me, I should have as soon as I recognized him. Did he bring any here? Matt asked. He looked at the stone walls around them and shivered. Rand thought he was remembering the Myrddraal more than Trollocs. The walls had not stopped the fate at Bear Lawn or at Whitebridge. If he did, Agomar laughed, they'll break their teeth on the walls of Faldara. Many others have before. Speaking to everyone, but obviously addressing his words to Egwene and Nynaeve from the glances he gave them. And do not worry yourself about half-men either. Matt's face reddened. Every street and alley in Faldara is lit by night, and no man may hide his face inside the walls. Why would Master Thane do that? Egwene asked. 3 years ago. With a heavy sigh, Moraine sat down, holding up as if what she had done with Thane had trained her. 3 years this summer, as far back as that. The light surely favors us, else the Father of Lies would have triumphed while I still sat planning in Tarvalin. 3 years, Thane has been hunting you for the Dark One.
It's crazy. Some northern lights.
To the two rivers every spring as regular as a clock.
And then
3 years?
I have these other ones to adapt to. Some wedding cake and some key lime pie.
The Aes Sedai pointed a finger at him, fixing him. Thane told me everything, Rand. Or almost everything. I believe he managed to hold back something. Something important despite all I could do. But he said enough. 3 years ago, a half-man came for him in a town in Merindy. Thane was terrified, of course. But it is considered a very great honor among Darkbrand to be so summoned. Thane believed he had been chosen for his fate, and he had. Though not he believed. He was brought north to the Blight, to the Blasted Lands, to Sheol Ghul, where he met a man with eyes of fire who named himself Baalzaman. Matt shifted uneasily, Rand swallowed hard. It had to have been that way, of course, but that did not make it any easier to accept. Only Perrin looked at the Aes Sedai as if nothing could surprise him any longer. Light protect us, Agomar said fervently. Bane did not like what was happening to the ghoul, Moraine continued calmly. While we talked, he screamed off in a fire and burned. It almost killed him, bringing it all out from where he had it hidden. Even with my healing, he is a shattered ghoul. It will take much to make him whole again. I will make the effort, though, if for no other reason than to learn what more he still hides. He had been chosen because of where he did his peddling. No, she said quickly when they stirred. Not the two rivers only. The father of lies knew roughly where to find what he sought. Much more than we in Tavala. Fane said he has been made the Dark One's hound, and in a way he is right. The father of lies set Fane to hunt, first changing him so he could carry out that hunt. It is the thing done to bring about those changes that Fane fears to remember. He hates his master for them as much as he fears him. So Fane was sent sniffing and hunting through all the villages around Verlon, and all the way to the Mountains of Mist, and down to Tarn, and across into the two rivers. 3 springs ago, Perrin said slowly. I remember that spring. Fane came later than usual, but what was strange was that he lingered on. A whole week he remained, idle and gnashing his teeth about laying out money for a room at the Wine Spring Inn.
Wedding cake.
Fane likes his money. I remember now, Matt said. Everybody was wondering, was he sick? Or had he fallen for a local woman? That any of them would marry a peddler, of course. As well as one of the traveling people. He raised an eyebrow at him, and he shut his mouth. After that, Fane was taken to Shale Ghul again, and his mind was distilled. Rand's stomach turned over at the tone in the Aes Sedai's voice. It told more of what she meant than the grimace that flashed across her face. What he had was concentrated. The 2 rivers the next year, he was able to choose his targets out more clearly. Indeed, more clearly even than the Dark One had expected. Fane knew for a certainty that the one he sought was one of 3 in Emmett's field. Perrin grunted, and Matt began cursing in a soft monotone that even Nynaeve's glare did not stop. Agomar looked at them curiously. Rand felt only the faintest chill and wondered at it. 3 years the Dark One had been hunting him. Hunting them. He was sure it should have made his teeth chatter. Moraine did not allow Matt to interrupt her. She raised her voice enough to be heard over him. When Fane returned to Lugar, Baalzaman came to him in a dream. Fane abased himself and performed rites that would strike you deaf to hear the half of them, binding himself even more tightly to them. What is done in dreams can be more dangerous than what is done awake. Rand stared at the sharp warning look, but she did not pause. He was promised great rewards, power over kingdoms after Baalzaman's victory, and told that when he returned to Emond's Field, he was to mark the 3 he had found. A halfman would be there, waiting for him with Trollocs. We know now how the Trollocs came to the 2 rivers. There must have been an Ogier Grove and a waygate at Manethra.
The most beautiful of all,
Loyal said,
except for Tavalan.
He had been listening as intently as everyone else.
Manetheren is remembered fondly by the Ogier.
Agomar formed the name silently, his eyebrows raised in wonder. Manetheren. Lord Agomar, Moraine said, I will tell you how to find the waygate of Mafal the Daranel. It must be walled up and a guard set, and none allowed near. The halfmen have not learned all of the ways yet, but that waygate is to the south, and only hours from Faldar. The Lord of Faldar gave himself a shake, as if he were coming out of a trance. South? Peace. We don't need that. The light shine on us. It shall be done. Did Fane follow us through the ways? Perrin asked. He must have done. Moraine nodded. Fane would follow you 3 into the grave because he must. When the Murdrel failed at Emond's Field, it brought Fane with the Trollocs on our trail. The Fade would not let Fane ride with him. although he thought he should have the best horse in the two rivers and ride at the head of the band. The Myrtle forced him to run with the Trollocs, and the Trollocs to carry him when his feet gave out. They talked so that he could understand, arguing about the best way to cook him when his usefulness was done. Fane claims he turned against the Dark One before they reached the Tarn. But sometimes his greed for his promised rewards seeps into the open. When we had escaped across the Tarn, the Murdroll took the Trollocs back to the closest waygate in the Mountains of Mist and sent Fane across alone. He thought he was free then, but before he reached Bearlaw, another fate found him, and that one was not so kind. It made him sleep doubled up on himself in a Trolloc kettle at night to remind him of the price of failure. That one used him as far as Shadar-Logoth. By then, Fane was willing to give the Murdroll his mother if it would free him. But the Dark One never willingly loosens a hold he has gained. What I did there, sending an illusion of our tracks and smell off toward the mountains, fooled the Murdroll, but not Fane. The half-men did not believe him. Afterward, they dragged him behind them on a leash. Only when we seemed to keep always just ahead, no matter how hard they pressed, did some begin to credit him. Those were the four who returned to Shadar-Logoth. Fane claims it was Baalzamon himself who drove the Murdroll. Agomar shook his head contemptuously. The Dark One. Ha! The man's lying or mad. If Heartsbane were loose, we'd all of us be dead by now, or worse. Fane spoke the truth as he saw it, Moraine said. He could not lie to me, though he hid much. His words. Baalzamon appeared like a flickering candle flame, vanishing and reappearing, never in the same place twice. His eyes seared the Murdroll, and the fires of his mouth scourged us. Something, Lan said, drove four Fades to where they feared to go. A place they fear almost as much as they fear the wrath of the Dark One. Agomar grunted as if he had been kicked. He looked sick. It was evil against evil in the ruins of Shadar-Logoth, Moraine continued. Foul fighting vile. When Fane spoke of it, his teeth chattered and he whimpered. Many Trollocs were slain, consumed by Mashadar and other things, including the Trolloc that held Fane's leash. He fled the city as if it were the pit of doom at Shale Pool. Fane believed he was free at last. He intended to run until Baalzamon could never find him again, to the ends of the earth if necessary. Imagine his horror when he discovered that the compulsion to hunt did not lessen. Instead, it grew stronger and sharper with every day that passed. He could not eat except what he could scavenge while he hunted here. Beetles and lizards snatched while he ran. Half-rotten refuse dug from midden heaps in the dark of night. Nor could he stop until exhaustion collapsed him like an empty sack. As soon as he had strength to stand again, he was driven on. By the time he reached Camelin, he could feel his quarry even when it was a mile away. Here in the cells below, he would sometimes look up without realizing what he was doing. He was looking in the direction of this room. Rand had a sudden itch between his shoulder blades. It was as if he could feel Fane's eyes on him then, through the intervening stone. The Aes Sedai noticed his uneasy shrug, but she went on implacably. If Fane was half mad by the time he reached Camelin, he sank even further when he realized that only two of those he sought were there. He was compelled to find all of you, but he could do no other than follow the two who were there either. He spoke of screaming when the waygate opened in Camelin. The knowledge of how to do it was in his mind. He does not know how it came there. His hands moved of their own accord, burning with the fires of Baalzamon when he tried to stop them. The owner of the shop, who came to investigate the noise, Fane murdered. Not because he had to, but out of envy that the man could walk freely out of the cellar, while his feet carried him inexorably into the ways. Then Fane was the one you sensed following us, Egwene said. Lan nodded. How did he escape the Black Wind? Her voice shook. She stopped to swallow. It was right behind us at the waygate. He escaped, and he did not, Moraine said. The Black Wind caught him, and he claimed to understand the voices. Some greeted him as like to them. Others feared him. No sooner did the wind envelop Fane than it fled.
the light can serve us.
Loyal's whisper rumbled like a giant bumblebee. Pray that it does, Moraine said. There is much yet hidden about Pt.12, much I must learn. The evil goes deeper in him and stronger than in any man I have yet seen. It may be that the Dark One, in doing what he did to Fane, impressed some part of himself on the man, perhaps even unknowing some part of his intent. When I mentioned the Eye of the World, Fane clamped his jaws shut, but I felt something gnawing behind the silence. If only I had the time now. But we cannot wait.
If this man knows something,
Agomar said, I can get it out of him. His face held no mercy for dark friends. His voice promised no pity for Fane. If you can learn even a part of what you will face in the Blight, it's worth an extra day. Battles have been lost for not knowing what the enemy intends. Moraine sighed and shook her head ruefully. My lord, if we did not need at least one good night's sleep before facing the Blight, I would ride within the hour, though it meant the risk of meeting a Trolloc raid in the dark. Consider what I did learn from Fane. 3 years ago, the Dark One had to have Fane brought to Shale Gould to touch him, despite the fact that Fane is a Dark Friend dedicated to his marrow. 1 year ago, the Dark One could command Fane, the Dark Friend, through his dreams. This year, Baalzamon walks in the dreams of those who live in the light, and actually appears, if with difficulty, at Shadar Logoth. Not in his own body, of course, but even a projection of the Dark One's mind, even a projection that flickers and cannot hold, is more deathly dangerous to the world than all the Trolloc hordes combined. The seals on Shale Gould are weakening desperately, Lord Agomar. There is no time. Agomar bowed his head in acquiescence, but when he raised it again, there was still a stubborn set to his mouth. Aes Sedai, I can accept that when I lead the lances to Tarwin's Gap, we will be no more than a diversion, or a skirmish on the outskirts of the real battle. Duty takes men where it will as surely as does the pattern. Neither promises that what we do will have greatness. But our skirmish will be useless, even should we win if you lose the battle. If you say your party must be small, I say well and good. But I beg you to make every effort to see that you can win. Leave these young men here, Aes Sedai. I swear to you that I can find 3 experienced men with no thought of glory in their heads to replace them. Good swordsmen, who are almost as handy in the Blight as Lan. Let me ride to the Gap, knowing that I have done what I can to help you be victorious. I must take them and no others, Lord Agomar, Moraine said gently. They are the ones who will fight the battle at the Eye of the World. Agomar's jaw dropped, and he stared at Rand and Mac and Perrin. Suddenly, the Lord of Faldara took a step back, his hand groping unconsciously for the sword he never wore inside the fortress. They aren't. You are not Red Ajah, Moraine said I. But surely not even you would. Sudden sweat glistened on his shaven head. They are Taviran, Moraine said smoothly. The pattern weaves itself around them. Already the Dark One has tried to kill each of them more than once. 3 Taviran in one place are enough to change the life around them as surely as a whirlpool changes the path of a straw. When the place is the Eye of the World, the pattern might weave even the Father of Lies into itself and make him harmless again. Agomar stopped trying to find his sword, but he still looked at Rand and the others doubtfully. Moraine said I, if you say they are, then they are. And I cannot see it. Farm boys. Are you certain, I said I? The old blood, Moraine said. Split out like a river breaking into 1,000 times 1,000 streams. But sometimes the streams join together to make a river again. The old blood of Manetheren is strong and pure in almost all these young men. Can you doubt the strength of Manetheren's blood, Lord Agomar? Rand glanced sideways at the Aes Sedai. Almost all. He risked a look at Nynaeve. She had turned back to watch as well as listen, though she still avoided looking at Lan. He caught the Wisdom's eye. She shook her head. She had not told the Aes Sedai that he was not 2 Rivers born. What does Moraine know? Manethra, Agomar said slowly, nodding. I would believe that. Then more quickly. The wheel brings strange times. Farm boys carry the honor of Manethran into the blight. Yet if any blood can strike a fell blow at the Dark One, it would be the blood of Manethran. It shall be done as you wish, Aes Sedai. Then let us go to our rooms, Warren said. We must leave with the sun, for time grows short. The young men must sleep close to me. Time is too short before the battle to allow the Dark One another strike at them. Too short. Grant felt their eyes on him, studying him and his friends, weighing their strength, and he shivered. Too short. Chapter 48. The Blight. The wind whipped Lan's cloak, sometimes making him hard to see, even in the sunlight. And Ingtar and the 100 lances Lord Agomar had sent to escort them to the border, in case they met a Trolloc raid, made a brave display in double column with their armor and their red pennants, and their steel-clad horses led by Ingtar's gray owl banner. They were easily as grand as 100 of the Queen's guards, but it was the towers just inside ahead of them that Rand studied. He had had all morning to watch the Sharnar lances. Each tower stood tall and solid atop a hill, half a mile from its neighbor. East and west, others rose, and more beyond those. A broad, walled ramp spiraled around each stone shaft, winding all the way around by the time it reached the heavy gates, halfway to the crenellated top.
Easy, buddy.
A sortie from the garrison would be protected by the wall until it reached the ground. But enemies striving to reach the gate would climb under a hail of arrows and stones and hot oil from the big kettles poised on the outward flaring ramparts above. A large steel mirror, carefully turned down, away from the sun now, glittered atop each tower below the high iron cup where signal fires could be lit when the sun did not shine. The signal would be flashed to towers further from the border, and by those to still others, so relayed to the Heartland fortresses, where the lances would ride to turn back the raid. Were times normal, they would. From the two nearest tower tops, men watched them approach. Just a few men on each, peering curiously through the crenels. In the best of times, the towers were only manned enough for self-defense, depending more on stone walls than strong arms to survive. But every man who could be spared, and more, was riding to Tarwin's Gap. The fall of the towers would not matter if the lances failed to hold the gap. Rand shivered as they rode between the towers. It was almost as if he had ridden through a wall of colder air. This was the border. The land beyond looked no different from Shinar, but out there, somewhere beyond the leafless trees, was the blight. Ingtar lifted a steel fist to halt the lances short of a plain stone post inside of the towers. A border post marking the boundary between Shinar and what once was Malkir. Your pardon, Moraine Aes Sedai. Pardon, Dashan. Pardon, Builder. Lord Agomar commanded me to go no further. He sounded unhappy about it, disgruntled at life in general. That is as we planned, Lord Agomar and I, Moraine said. Ingtar grunted sourly. Pardon, Aes Sedai. He apologized, not sounding as if he meant it. To escort you here means we may not reach the gap before the fighting is done. I am robbed of the chance to stand with the rest, and at the same time I am commanded not to ride one step beyond the border post, as if I had never before been in the blight. And my Lord Agomar will not tell me why. Behind the bars of his face guard, his eyes turned the last word into a question to the Aes Sedai. He scorned to look at Rand and the others. He had learned they would accompany Lan into the blight. You can't have my place, Matt muttered to Rand. Lan gave them both a sharp look. Matt dropped his eyes, his face turning red. Each of us has his part in the pattern, Ingtar, Moraine said firmly. From here we must thread ours alone. Ingtar's bow was stiffer than his armor made it. As you wish it, Aes Sedai. I must leave you now, and ride hard in order to reach Tarwin's Gap. At least I will be allowed to face Trollocs there. Are you truly that eager, Nynaeve asked, to fight Trollocs? Ingtar gave her a puzzled look, then glanced at Lan as if the warder might explain. That is what I do, lady, he said slowly. That is why I am. He raised a gauntleted hand to land, open palm, toward the warder. Saravya Ninto Mashima Taishite. Daishan. Peace, favor your sword. Pulling his horse around, Ingtar rode east with his bannermen and his 100 lances. They went at a walk, but a steady pace, as fast as armored horses could manage with a far distance yet to go. What a strange thing to say, Gwen said. Why do they use it like that? Peace. When you have never known a thing except to dream, Lan replied, heeling Mondoc forward. It becomes more than a talisman. As Rand followed the warder past the stone border post, he turned in his saddle to look back, watching Ingtar and the lances disappear behind barren trees, and the border post vanish. And last of all, the towers on their hilltops looking over the trees. All too soon they were alone, riding north under the leafless canopy of the forest. Rand sank into watchful silence, and for once even Matt had nothing to say. That morning the gates of Baldara had opened with the dawn. Lord Agomar, armored and helmeted now like his soldiers, rode with the Black Hawk banner and the 3 foxes from the east gate toward the sun, still only a red sliver above the trees. Like a steel snake undulating to mounted kettle drums, the column wound its way out of the town 4 abreast, Agomar at its head, hidden in the forest before its tail left Baldara Keep. There were no cheers in the streets to speed them on their way, only their own drums and their pennants cracking in the wind. But their eyes looked toward the rising sun with purpose. Eastward they would join other steel serpents from Balmoran, behind King Isar himself with his sons at his side, and from Ancordale, that held the eastern marches, guarded the spine of the world. From Most Shirara and Fal Sion and Cameron Khan, and all the other fortresses in Shinar, great and small. Joined into a greater serpent, they would turn north to Tarwin's Gap. Another exodus had begun at the same time, using the King's Gate that led out on the way to Falmaran. Carts and wagons, people mounted and people afoot, driving their livestock, carrying children on their backs, faces as long as the morning shadows.
Round 2 done. That one
Reluctance to
wasn't
leave
the
their
one
homes,
burned very
perhaps
good.
forever, slowed
It
their
ain't mainly
feet,
because it's roachweed.
yet fear of what was coming spurred them, so that they went in bursts, feet dragging, then breaking into a run for a dozen paces, only to fall back once more, to shuffling through the dust. A few paused outside the town to watch the soldiers' armored line winding into the forest. Hope blossomed in some eyes, and prayers were muttered. Prayers for the soldiers, prayers for themselves, before they turned south again, trudging. The smallest column went out of the Mulkir Gate. Left behind were a few who would remain, soldiers and a sprinkling of older men, their wives dead and their grown children making the slow way south. A last handful so that whatever happened in Tarwin's Gap, Faldara would not fall undefended. Ingtar's gray owl led the way, but it was Moraine who took them north. The most important column of all, and the most desperate. For at least an hour after they passed the border post, there was no change in land or forest. The water kept them at a hard pace, as fast a walk as the horses could maintain, but Rand kept wondering when they would reach the Blight. The hills became a little higher, but the trees and the creepers and the underbrush were no different than what he had seen in Shinar, gray and all but leafless. He began to feel warm enough to sling his cloak across the pommel of his saddle. This is the best weather we've seen all year, Egwene said, shrugging out of her own cloak. Nynaeve shook her head, frowning as if listening to the wind. It feels wrong. Rand nodded. He could feel it too, though he could not say what it was exactly he was feeling. The wrongness went beyond the first warmth he could remember out of doors this year. It was more than the simple fact that it should have been so warm this far north. It must be the Blight. But the land was the same. The sun climbed high, a red ball that could not give so much warmth despite the cloudless sky. A little while later, he unbuttoned his coat. Sweat trickled down his face. He was not the only one. Matt took his coat off, openly displaying the golden ruby dagger, and wiped his face with the end of his scarf. Blinking, he rewound the scarf into a narrow band low over his eyes. Nynaeve and Egwene fanned themselves. They rode slumped as if they were wilting. Loyal undid his high-collared tunic all the way down, and his shirt as well. The Ogier had a narrow strip of hair up the middle of his chest, as thick as fur. He muttered apologies all around.
You must forgive me. Studying Shanghai is in the mountains and cool.
His broad nostrils flared, drawing in air that was becoming warmer by the minute.
I don't like this heat and damp.
It was damp, Rand realized. It felt like the mire in the depths of summer, back in the two rivers. In that boggy swamp, every breath came as if through a wool blanket soaked in hot water. There was no soggy ground here, only a few ponds and streams, trickles to someone used to the waterwood. But the air was like that in the mire. Only Perrin, still in his coat, was breathing easily. Perrin and the warder. There were a few leaves now on the trees that were not evergreen. Rand reached out to touch a branch and stopped with his hand short of the leaves. Sickly yellow mottled the red of the new growth, and black flecks like disease. I told you not to touch anything. The warder's voice was flat. He still wore a shifting cloak, as if heat made no more impression on him than cold. It almost made his angular face seem to float unsupported above Mondar's back. Flowers can kill in the blight, and leaves maim. There's a little thing called a stick that likes to hide where the leaves are thickest, looking like its name, waiting for something to touch it. When something does, it bites. Not poison. The juice begins to digest the stick's prey for it. The only thing that can save you is to cut off the arm or leg that was bitten. But a stick won't bite unless you touch it. Other things in the blight will. Rand jerked his hand back, leaves untouched, and wiped it on his pants leg. Then we're in the blight, Perrin said. Strangely, he did not sound frightened. Just the fringe, Land said grimly. His stallion kept moving forward, and he spoke over his shoulder. The real blight still lies ahead. There are things in the blight that hunt by sound, and some may have wandered this far south. Sometimes they cross the mountains of doom. Much worse than sticks. Keep quiet and keep up if you want to stay alive. He continued to set a hard face, not waiting for an answer. Mile by mile, the corruption of the blight became more apparent. Leaves covered the trees in ever greater profusion, but stained and spotted with yellow and black, with livid red streaks like blood poisoning. Every leaf and creeper seemed bloated, ready to burst at a touch. Flowers hung on trees, and weeds in a parody of spring, sickly pale and pulpy, waxen things that appeared to be rotting while Rand watched. When he breathed through his nose, the sweet stench of decay, heavy and thick, sickened him. When he tried breathing through his mouth, he almost gagged. The air tasted like a mouthful of spoiled meat. The horse's hooves made a soft squishing as rotten ripe things broke open under them. Matt leaned out of his saddle and spewed until his stomach was empty. Rand sought the void, but calmness was little help against the burning bile that kept creeping up his throat. Empty or not, Matt heaved again a mile later, bringing up nothing, and yet again after that. Egwene looked as if she wanted to be sick too, swallowing constantly. And Nynaeve's face was a white mask of determination, her jaw set and her eyes fixed on Moraine's back. The wisdom would not admit to feeling ill unless the Aes Sedai did first, but Rand did not think she would have to wait long. Moraine's eyes were tight, her lips pale. Despite the heat and damp, Loyal wrapped a scarf around his nose and mouth. When he met Rand's gaze, the Ogier's outrage and disgust were plain in his eyes.
I had heard,
he began, his voice muffled by the wool, then stopped to clear his throat with a grimace.
It tastes like I had heard and read about the blight, but nothing could describe.
His gesture somehow took in the smell as well as the eye-sickening growth.
That even the Dark One should do this to trees.
The warder was not affected, of course, at least not that Rand could see, but to his surprise, neither was Perrin. Or rather, not in the way the rest of them were. The big youth glared at the obscene forest through which they rode, as he might have at an enemy. or the banner of an enemy. He caressed the axe at his belt as if unaware of what he was doing, and muttered to himself, half growling in a way that made the hair on Rand's neck stir. Even in full sunlight, his eyes glowed, golden and fierce. The heat did not abate as the bloody sun fell toward the horizon. In the distance to the north, mountains rose, higher than the mountains of mist, black against the sky. Sometimes an icy wind from the sharp peaks gusted far enough to reach them. The torrid humidity leached away most of the mountain chill, but what remained was winter cold compared to the swelter it replaced, if just for a moment. The sweat on Rand's face seemed to flash into beads of ice. As the wind died, the beads melted again, running angry lines down his cheeks, and the thick heat returned harder than before by comparison. For the instant the wind surrounded them, it swept away the fetor, yet he would have done without that too if he could have. The cold was the chill of the grave. It carried the dusty must of an old tomb newly opened. We cannot reach the mountains by nightfall, Rand said. It is dangerous to move at night, even for a warder alone. There is a place not far off, Moraine said. It would be a good omen for us to camp there. The warder gave her a flat look, then nodded reluctantly. Yes, we must camp somewhere. Might as well be there. The eye of the world was beyond the high passes when I found it, Moraine said. Better to cross the mountains of doom in full daylight at noon. The Dark One's powers in this world are weakest. You talk as if the eye isn't always in the same place. Egwene spoke to the Aes Sedai, but it was Loyal who answered. No two among the Ogier have found it in exactly the same place. The Green Man seems to be found where he is needed, but it has always been beyond the high passes. They are treacherous, the high passes, and haunted by creatures of the Dark One. We must reach the passes before we need worry about them, Lan said. Tomorrow we will be truly into the blight. Rand looked at the forest around him, every leaf and flower diseased, every creeper decaying as it grew, and he could not repress a shudder. If this isn't truly the blight, what is? Land turned them westward at an angle to the sinking sun. The warder maintained the pace he had set before, but there was reluctance in the set of his shoulders. The sun was a sullen red ball just touching the treetops when they crested a hill, and the warder drew rein. Beyond them to the west lay a network of lakes, the waters glittering darkly in the slanting sunlight, like beads of random size on a necklace of many strings. In the distance, circled by the lakes, stood jagged-topped hills, thick in the creeping shadows of evening. For one brief instant, the sun's rays caught the shattered tops, Rand's breath stilled. Not hills. The broken remnants of 7 towers. He was not sure if anyone else had seen it. The sight was gone as quickly as it came. The warder was dismounting, his face as lacking in emotion as a stone. Couldn't we camp down by the lakes? Nynaeve asked, patting her face with her kerchief. It must be cooler down by the water. Light, Matt said. I'd just like to stick my head in one of them. I might never take it out. Just then something roiled the waters of the nearest lake. The dark water, phosphorescing as a huge body, rolled beneath the surface. Length on man-thick length sent ripples spreading, rolling on until at last a tail rose, waving a point like a wasp's stinger for an instant in the twilight, at least 5 spans into the air. All along that length, fat tentacles writhed like monstrous worms, as many as a centipede's legs. It slid slowly beneath the surface and was gone, only the fading ripples to say it had ever been. Rand closed his mouth and exchanged a look with Perrin. Perrin's yellow eyes were as disbelieving as he knew his own must be. Nothing that big could live in a lake that size. These couldn't have been hands, those tentacles. They couldn't have been. On second thought, Rand said faintly, I like it right here just fine. I will set guarding wards around this hill, Moraine said. She had already dismounted from Aldeeb. A true barrier would draw the attention we do not want like flies to honey. But if any creation of the Dark One or anything that serves the shadow comes within a mile of us, I will know. I'd be happier with the barrier, Matt said as his boots touched the ground. Just as long as it kept that thing on the other side. Oh, do be quiet, Matt, Egwene said curtly, at the same time as Nynaeve spoke. And have them waiting for us when we leave in the morning? You are a fool, Matron Coffin. Matt glowered at the two women as they climbed down, but he kept his mouth shut. As he took Bella's reins, Rand shared a grin with Perrin. For a moment, it was almost like being home, having Matt saying what he should not at the worst possible time. Then the smile faded from Perrin's face. In the twilight, his eyes did glow, as if they had a yellow light behind them. Rand's grin slipped away too. It isn't like home at all. Rand and Matt and Perrin helped Lan unsaddle and hobble the horses while the others began setting up the camp. Loyal muttered to himself as he set up the warder's tiny stove, but his thick fingers moved deftly. Egwene was humming as she filled the tea kettle from a bulging water bag. Rand no longer wondered why the warder had insisted on bringing so many full water skins. Setting the bay's saddle in line with the others, he unfastened his saddlebags and blanket roll from the cantle, turned, and stopped with a tingle of fear. The Ogier and the women were gone. So was the stove and all the wicker panniers from the pack horse. The hilltop was empty except for evening shadows. With a numb hand, he fumbled for his sword, dimly hearing Matt curse. Perrin had his axe out, his shaggy head swiveling to find the danger. She murders, Lan muttered. Unconcernedly, the warder strode across the hilltop, and at his third step, he vanished. Rand exchanged wide-eyed looks with Matt and Perrin, and then they were all darting for where the warder had disappeared. Abruptly, Rand skidded to a halt, taking another step when Matt ran into his bag. Egwene looked up from setting the kettle atop the tiny stove. Nynaeve was closing the mantle on a second lit lantern. They were all there, Moraine sitting cross-legged, Lan lounging on an elbow, Loyal taking a book out of his pack. Cautiously, Rand looked behind him. The hillside was there as it had been, the shadowed trees, the lakes beyond sinking into darkness. He was afraid to step back, afraid they would all disappear again, and perhaps this time he would not be able to find them. Edging carefully around him, Perrin let out a long breath. Moraine noticed the three of them standing there gaping. Perrin looked abashed and slipped his axe back into the heavy belt loop as if he thought no one might notice. A smile touched her lips. It is a simple thing, she said, a bending, so any eye looking at us sees around us instead. We cannot have the eyes that will be out there seeing our lights tonight. The light is no place to be in the dark. Moraine Sedai says I might be able to do it. Egwene's eyes were bright. She says I can handle enough of the one power right now. Not without training, child, Moraine cautioned. The simplest matter concerning the one power can be dangerous to the untrained and to those around them. Perrin snorted, and Egwene looked so uncomfortable that Rand wondered if she had already been trying her abilities. Nynaeve set down the lantern. Together with the tiny flame of the stove, the pair of lanterns gave a generous light. When you go to Tar Valon, Egwene, she said carefully, perhaps I'll go with you. The look she gave Moraine was strangely defensive. It will do her good to see a familiar face among strangers. She'll need someone to advise her besides Aes Sedai. Perhaps that would be for the best, Wisdom, Moraine said simply. Egwene laughed and clapped her hands. Oh, that will be wonderful! And you, Rand, you'll come too, won't you? He paused in the act of sitting across the stove from her, then slowly lowered himself. He thought her eyes had never been bigger or brighter, or more like pools that he could lose himself in. Spots of color appeared in her cheeks, and she gave a smaller laugh. Perrin, Matt, you two will come, won't you? We'll all be together. Matt gave a grunt that could have signified anything, and Perrin only shrugged. But she took it for assent. You see, Rand? We'll all be together. Light. If a man could drown those eyes, I'd be happy doing it. Embarrassed, he cleared his throat. Do they have sheep in Tar Valon? That's all I know, herding sheep and growing tobacco. I believe, Moraine said, that I can find something for you to do in Tar Valon. For all of you. Not herding sheep, perhaps, but something you will find interesting. There, Egwene said, as if it were settled. I know. I will make you my warder when I'm in Aes Sedai. You would like being a warder, wouldn't you? My warder? She sounded sure, but he saw the question in her eyes. She wanted an answer, needed it. I'd like being a warder, he said. She's not for you, nor you for her. Why did men have to tell me that? Darkness came down heavily, and everyone was tired. Loyal was the first to roll over and ready himself for sleep, but others followed soon after. No one used their blankets except for a pillow. Moraine had put something in the oil of the lamps that dispelled the stench of the blight from the hilltop, but nothing diminished the heat. The moon gave a wavering, watery light, but the sun might have been at its zenith for all the cool the night had. Rand found sleep impossible, even with the Aes Sedai stretched out not a span away to shield his dreams. It was the thick air that kept him awake. Loyal's soft snores were a rumble that made Perrin's seem non-existent, but they did not stop weariness from claiming the others. The warder was still awake, seated not far from him with his sword across his knees, watching the night. To Rand's surprise, so was Nynaeve. The wisdom looked at Lan silently for a long time, then poured a cup of tea and brought it to him. When he reached out with a murmur of thanks, she did not let go right away. I should have known you would be a king, she said quietly. Her eyes were steady on the warder's face, but her voice trembled slightly. Lan looked back at her just as intently. It seemed to Rand that the warder's face actually softened. I am not a king, Nynaeve. Just a man. A man without as much to his name as even the meanest farmer's brought. Nynaeve's voice steadied. Some women don't ask for land or gold. Just the man. And the man who would ask her to accept so little would not be worthy of her. You are a remarkable woman, as beautiful as the sunrise, as fierce as a warrior. You are a lioness, Wisdom. But wisdom seldom wins. She paused to take a deep breath, as if steeling herself. But if I go to Tarval, it may be that I will be something other than a wisdom. Aes Sedai marry as seldom as wisdoms. Few men can live with so much power in a wife, dimming them by her radiance, whether she wishes to or not. Some men are strong enough. I know one such. If there could have been any doubt, her look left none as to whom she meant. All I have is a sword, and a war I cannot win, but can never stop fighting. I've told you I care nothing for that. Light, you've made me say more than is proper already. Will you shame me to the point of asking you? I will never shame you. The gentle tone, like a caress, sounded odd to Rand's ears in the warder's voice, but it made Nynaeve's eyes brighten. I will hate the man you choose because he is not me, and love him if he makes you smile. No woman deserves the sure knowledge of widow's black as a bride price. You least of all. He set the untouched cup on the ground and rose. I must check the horses. Nynaeve remained there, kneeling, after he had gone. Sleep or no, Rand closed his eyes. He did not think the wisdom would like it if he watched her cry. Chapter 49. The Dark One stirs. Dawn woke Rand with a start, the sullen sun pricking his eyelids as it peeked reluctantly over the treetops of the Blight. Even so early, heat covered the spoiled lands in a heavy blanket. He lay on his back with his head pillowed on his blanket roll, staring at the sky. It was still blue, the sky, even here. That, at least, was untouched. He was surprised to realize that he had slept. For a minute, the dim memory of a conversation overheard seemed like part of some dream. Then he saw Nynaeve's red-rimmed eyes. She had not slept, obviously. Lance's face was harder than ever, as if he had resumed a mask and did not intend to let it slip again. Egwene went over and crouched beside the wisdom, her face concerned. He could not make out what they said. Egwene spoke, and Nynaeve shook her head. Egwene said something else, and the wisdom waved her away dismissively. Instead of going, Egwene bent her head closer. For a few minutes, the two women talked even more softly, with Nynaeve still shaking her head. The wisdom ended it with a laugh, hugging Egwene, and, by her expression, making soothing talk. When Egwene stood, though, she glared at the warder. Lan did not seem to notice. He did not look in Nynaeve's direction at all. Shaking his head, Bran gathered his things and gave his hands and face and teeth a hasty wash with the little water Lan allowed for such things. He wondered if women had a way of reading men's minds. It was an unsettling thought. All women are Aes Sedai. Telling himself he was letting the blight get to him, he rinsed out his mouth and hurried to get the bay saddled. It was more than a little disconcerting, having the campsite disappear before he reached the horses, but by the time his saddle girth was tight, everything on the hill winked back into view. Everyone was hurrying. The 7 towers stood plain in the morning light, distant broken stumps, like huge rough hills that merely hinted at grandeur gone. The 100 lakes were smooth, unruffled blue. Nothing broke the surface this morning. When he looked at the lakes and the ruined towers, he could almost ignore the sickly things growing around the hill. Lan did not seem to be avoiding looking at the towers, any more than he seemed to be avoiding Nynaeve, but somehow he never did, as he concentrated on getting them ready to go. After the wicker panniers were fastened on the pack horse, after every scrap and smudge and track were gone and everyone else was mounted, the Aes Sedai stood in the middle of the hilltop with their eyes closed, not even seeming to breathe. Nothing happened that Rand could see, except that Nynaeve and Egwene shivered despite the heat and rubbed their arms briskly. Egwene's hands suddenly froze in her arms, and she opened her mouth, staring at the wisdom. Before she could speak, Nynaeve also ceased her rubbing and gave her a sharp look. The 2 women looked at one another, then Egwene nodded and grinned, and after a moment, Nynaeve did too, though her smile was only half-hearted. Rand scrubbed his fingers through his hair, already more damp with sweat than with the water he had splashed in his face. He was sure there was something in the silent exchange that he should understand. But that feather-like brush across his mind vanished before he could grasp it. "What are we waiting for?" Matt demanded, the low band of his scarf across his forehead. He had his bow across the pommel of his saddle with an arrow nocked, and his quiver pulled around on his belt for an easy reach. Moraine opened her eyes and started down the hill. "For me to remove the last vestige of what I did here last night. The residues will have dissipated on their own in a day, but I will not take any risk I can avoid now. We are too close, and the shadow is too strong here. Lan?" The warder only waited for her to settle in Aldine's saddle before he led them north, toward the mountains of Doom, looming in the near distance. Even under the sunrise, the peaks rose black and lifeless, like jagged teeth. In a wall they stretched east and west as far as the eye could see. "Will we reach the eye today, Moraine Sedai?" Egwene asked. The Aes Sedai gave Loyal a sidelong look. "I hope that we will. When I found it before, it was just the other side of the mountains, at the foot of the high passes." "He says it moves," Matt said, nodding at Loyal. "What if it isn't where you expect?" "Then we will continue to hunt until we do find it. The Green Man senses need, and there can be no need greater than ours. Our need is the hope of the world." As the mountains drew closer, so did the true blight. Where a leaf had been spotted black and mottled yellow before, now foliage fell wetly while he watched, breaking apart from the weight of its own corruption. The trees themselves were tortured, crippled things, twisted branches clawing at the sky as if begging mercy from some power that refused to hear. Ooze slid like pus from bark cracked and split. As if nothing truly solid was left of them, the trees seemed to tremble from the passage of the horses over the ground. "Look as if they want to grab us," Matt said nervously. Nynaeve gave him an exasperated, scornful look, and he added fiercely, "Well, they do look it." "And some of them do want it," the Aes Sedai said. Her eyes over her shoulder were harder than Lan's for an instant. "But they want no part of what I am, and my presence protects you." Matt laughed uneasily, as if he thought it a joke on her part. Rand was not so sure. This was the blight, after all. "But trees don't want. Why would a tree grab a man, even if it could? We're imagining things, and she's just trying to keep us alert." Abruptly, he stared off to his left into the forest. That tree, not 20 paces away, had trembled, and it was not of his imagination. He could not say what kind it was or had been. Gnarled and tormented was its shape. As he watched, the tree suddenly whipped back and forth again, then bent down, flailing at the ground. Something screamed, shrill and piercing. The tree sprang back straight, its limbs entwined around a dark mass that writhed and spat and screamed. He swallowed hard and tried to edge Red away, but the tree stood on every side and trembled. The bay rolled his eyes, white showing all the way around. Red found himself in a solid knot of horseflesh, as everyone else tried to do the same as he. Keep moving, Lan commanded, drawing his sword. The warder wore steel-backed gauntlets now.
Alright, I'm gonna call into this live for tonight. I won't be on tomorrow night because we're gonna be doing a fishing, and I'll try to do it the following night. But I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone that keeps coming by. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe.